I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. I would ask if anyone has any public comment from the board this evening. Hearing none. Do we have any announcements?
No.
No announcements. Any public comment from the public this evening? Okay, so we will go right into our first order of business, which is a nuisance dog complaint. It's a hearing regarding a complaint filed against William Beatty, okay, I'm sorry. Of 890 Flat Hill Road, again, the owner of Dagan, a male Staffordshire Terrier. So, this hearing is called pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157, complaint of a nuisance or vicious dogs. So I'm going to ask everyone first, because this is an official hearing, and all the testimony will be done under oath. So anybody who will be giving testimony before the board, not only will you have to come to the microphone when you give your testimony, but I'm going to ask everybody to stand who is going to give testimony, and then I have to issue an oath. And also I'm going to ask people to state their names so that the record will show who has stood and taken the oath. So anybody who's going to be testifying tonight, please stand. Oh, there. Okay, there are 6 people, and we probably should get their names first. So if one at a time, you could come to the microphone, just state your name and address, and then go back to where you were standing. That'd be great.
I'm William Beatty, 890 Flat Hill Road.
Thank you.
Patricia Beatty, 890 Flat Hill Road.
Okay.
Sabrina Ramondelli, 599 Reservoir Road.
Sam Ramondelli, 599 Reservoir Road.
Kathy Como, Animal Control.
And James Marino, the police chief.
Okay, so would all 6 of you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Okay. Let me just outline the basic format of the hearing. So I will read through this and then we'll start. So the town manager will read the complaint. The complainant will then provide an argument in support of the complaint. We will then hear the report of the animal control officer, then the report of the police chief. Then the board will ask questions of any of the people providing testimony. Then the public can ask questions. Then the defendant or a representative of the defendant will provide their arguments. Then the board asks questions, the public can ask questions of that. Then we have a concluding statement from the complainant, a concluding statement from the defendant, and then I will close the public hearing and the board will deliberate at that point. No questions will be permitted after the speaker has finished his or her presentations. The questions will be accepted first from board members, then from the public, and all questions for the public will be addressed through this chair to the person that the question is directed. Any disagreement with answers is restricted to rebuttal statements. So there will be no shouting out from the audience or anything. We got to keep things very strictly under control. Then based on our deliberation, we have certain options that are available to us depending on what we find in the testimony. Do I need to go over what those might be?
Maybe just the first.
Okay, so basically on deliberation, the first point is, do we dismiss the complaint or do we deem the dog to be a dangerous dog or a nuisance dog? That's the first finding. If we deem it to be a dangerous dog or a nuisance dog, then we have certain things that can be applied that are available, anything from restricting the dog, having it leashed when outside, muzzled, etc., proof of insurance. There are 4 options that we can use, one or more of those options should the board find that the dog is a nuisance or dangerous dog. Those are the 2 findings. Okay, so with that, does anybody have any questions about the format first? Okay, then I will ask the town manager to read the complaint.
So I am going to first read the notice into the record and then the complaint. So first, the notice was sent on September 19, 2013 to William Beatty. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157, a public hearing has been scheduled for Tuesday, October 1st, 2013 at 7 p.m. in the Joseph F. Bellata Conference Room, 2nd floor, Town Hall, 17 Main Street, Lunenburg. The purpose of the hearing is to review and determine what action may be deemed necessary as a result of the dog complaint filed by Sam Ramondelli, 599 Reservoir Road, Lunenburg. A copy of the complaint and police report is attached for your review. Specifically, the complaint alleges that your adult canine, name Dagan, breed Staffordshire, sex male, is a nuisance because he has a vicious disposition as a result of the alleged attack of a minor on July 5th, 2013. At the hearing, the Board of Selectmen will review the complaint, police report, witness and/or victim statements, and other related materials in order to make a determination and/or disposition. You have the right to be present at the hearing and to present information. You have the right to be represented by counsel if you so choose and at your sole expense. And if you have questions regarding the proceeding, contact my office. Then the specific complaint, again filed by Sam Ramondelli, 599 Reservoir Road, Lunenburg, Mass. Dog information, dog name, Dagan, description, Staffordshire Terrier, owner's name, William Beatty, address 890 Flat Hill Road, Lunenburg, Massachusetts. The complaint states, the complainant identified above, state that the dog described in this complaint constitutes a nuisance because it has a vicious disposition. The description of the circumstances reference the dog attack of July 5th, 2013. I therefore respectfully request that an investigation be undertaken pursuant to the provisions of General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157, resulting in the issuance of any order necessary to abate the above noted nuisance. I understand that this obligates me to attend a hearing and provide testimony under oath, and I intend to make myself available for this purpose. Signed, Sam Ramondelli, September 3rd, 2013.
So according to the statute, you can actually complain the dog as a nuisance dog or a dangerous dog, and they have slightly different nuances about what the board can do. From the declaration of the complaint, it's clear that this is a dangerous dog complaint, not a nuisance dog, which, again, they have different variations. So, because both of them were used interchangeably there, and I just want to be clear that by law, you have to make a complaint of one or the other. This is clearly a dangerous dog complaint. If I'm misstating that, Mr. Ramondelli, please, okay, that is correct. Okay. So the complainant will provide an argument in support of the complaint. So will the complainants please come forward and then give their account of what happened. Please speak right into the microphone. This is not for us, but for the people at home. Thank you.
So would you like me to tell you what happened that day?
Yeah, introduce yourself again. And
All right. I'm Sabrina Ramondelli, 599 Reservoir Road. It was July 5th. It was around 9:30 in the morning. I called my friend Nick, went over his house, and we went outside. We were doing some pull-ups in between 2 trees in the backyard, and we saw Billy up on his porch. And Billy was like, "Hey, I almost blew up the front of my boat last night shooting off fireworks." And he's like, "You can see him from up top. Come on up." So me and Nick start to walk over, and I get closer to the house on the side of the stairs that lead up to the deck, and I see the dog, and the dog is on a run, or at least it's long enough to reach me though. Go around the corner, and the dog is charging me, and at first I wasn't scared. I'm not typically scared of dogs. I like dogs. And when it got closer, I realized that this dog's coming to attack me. So I turned, and it bit me first on my back, and then it bit me down on my leg, right here. And Nick pulled the dog off of me. He pulled it back by the collar that it was on, punched him a whole bunch to make him stop biting me. And after that, I ran up the stairs because I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I told Billy the dog bit me. I need to go to the hospital as soon as possible. And everyone was in shock. We didn't exactly know what to do. So I told Nick, I need to go to the hospital right now. So I grabbed my leg and I just started hobbling over to his house. And I was like, Nate, his dad, we need to go to the hospital right now. I got attacked by Billy's dog. And at first he thought it was a joke. And I was like, this is serious, we need to go. So we got in the car, went to the hospital as soon as possible. And when we got there, I was there for like 10 minutes. They got me in a hospital bed. And they gave me pain medication right away. I waited until the suture guy came in to sew me up. He said, wow, he was surprised I could take that much pain. He said, that's a nice bite you got there. I was like, yeah. So waited, got sewn up, sent me out the next day. But I'm just here because I don't want that dog to bite anyone else. It scared me. I didn't think it was going to bite me. I'm sure anybody else wouldn't have thought anything else of it. And if it were to happen to anyone else, I would feel that's somewhat my fault because I had the opportunity to try and put a stop to it again. So.
Would you just tell me what the doctor said to you about your leg?
I don't know what he said to me.
You said to me about, the doctors got in the report that, it was...
Oh, I had 10 stitches on my leg. I had 2 stitches up here. It bit me on like my whole back right here. We have pictures to show if you guys would like. And it bit me. These are the 2 back bite marks right here. It went around my entire leg and it tore right here. I had a hole in my leg about this size. And I had 2 holes in the back of my leg right here. So that's what it is.
Are you entering those into
Yes.
evidence or not? Okay, so if you would bring them
Sure.
up to the side here.
Sure, this was the initial attack, and then this is the second. No, you can.
Is there any corresponding report from the doctor? Or the,
A few days after, I had a slight infection. We later found out that the dog hadn't been registered or given any shots, so there was a scare that I might have rabies. I waited the 10 days to figure it out after it was in quarantine. Thank God it didn't have rabies. Just a minor infection, went to the doctors in Worcester, and everything was fine after a few days.
is there a written doctor report?
There is, and I'm sorry to say, we got halfway up here. I got the pictures. She honestly forgot that report. I promise you I will give that to the town tomorrow. But we do have a doctor's report, which again, I will supply to you tomorrow. And I apologize, we got halfway up here. We were rushing to come here. She forgot it, honestly.
Okay, do you have something to add?
Yeah, well, just to tell you what happened, I was at home, received a phone call from Mr. Nathan Jones, again, Sam Raimondelli, 599 Reservoir Road, Sabrina's dad. Got a phone call from Nate Jones saying how he was going to rush Sabrina up to the hospital. At that time, my wife decided to go up to the hospital. I waited at the home to help out. we're trying to get hold of the dog officer. So many things had to happen. Once my wife got up there, she called. The doctor had questions as if the dog had rabies shots. We couldn't find out for quite some time. Again, it's July 5th, so couldn't reach the dog officer. But the following day, she did call and telling me that the dog was not licensed in Williamsburg, that the dog did not have rabies shots. So at that point, again, the following day, which would have been the 6th, calling the doctor. Of course, they're very disappointed because they don't know if they should treat this girl or not. Disinfection had set in. Sabrina came home afterwards and, was dragging that leg for nearly 1 month. I'm happy to say that, she's walking okay. Thank God the young, lady healed, other than the scar that she will have for life on both the shoulder and the leg. So then the dog officer informed me that the dog would be quarantined for 10 days because the dog did not receive rabies shots. It was told to me that at that time, the dog was brought for rabies shots, and now you'll have to confirm this or not, that the dog had a Lyme disease, so was not treated for rabies shots. Thankfully, after the 10 days, we did get a phone call from the dog officer saying that the dog was not rabid. Again, called the physician, and again, happy that the dog wasn't rabid. If you got a daughter or member of your family, I can just tell you it was the worst day of my life. I cried like a baby. I mean, the girl means so much to me. Never have I seen these people. I do not know these people. We have never received a phone call to see how's your daughter. Very disappointing to me. So that's why we're here. And I thank you for letting us speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if the animal control officer would please provide her report.
Kathy Como, Animal Control. On 7/5/13, I was called by Nathan Jones informing me there was a dog bite and the girl was at the emergency room. Sabrina Ramondelli, 17 years old, from Lunenburg. The dog belonged to William Beatty, who was living at his mom's residence at 890 Flat Hill Road since the winter of 2012. I went to Flat Hill Road to quarantine a dog named Dagan, Staffordshire Terrier, 5 years old, who was tied to a run off the back of Beatty's residence. I asked Patricia Beatty, owner of the home, what had happened, and she said that Sabrina and Nick Jones were uninvited on her property and were down by the camper parked on her property. Her son was in the game room over the garage, spotted them, and asked what they were doing. The two kids came up to the garage where he was at. The dog was at the end of the run barking, and Sabrina went too close to the dog and he jumped on her. She screamed, and William Beatty told her to come up the stairs to get away from the dog. The dog jumped up on her, putting his paws on her shoulder and wrapped himself around her leg. And as she broke away, acquired nail or bite lacerations on her shoulder and thigh. Doctor's report should say whether it was a bite or claw mark. Either way, it broke the skin and I had to quarantine the dog for 10 days. Vaccinated or not, the quarantine still applies. It has now been changed to 7 days, but it was 10 days. I called Shirley Animal Hospital for records because I was told that the dog could not have a rabies shot. They told me that the dog had Lyme disease and had been on treatment, so could not receive a rabies shot when they were in there with the dog. They had not returned to the hospital. I called Patricia Beatty and told her she had to return to the vet after the quarantine period, update the rabies shot, and she also had to take those papers to the town clerk and properly license the dog if the dog was at that residence living. Previous license was from New Hampshire. She returned to the vet on 7/25 and updated rabies shot and license the dog to the town of Lunenburg. The dog was in good health except for saliva abscess treated with antibiotics. The quarantine was released on 7/15 and sent back to the Division of Animal Health in Boston. I called several times to see if Sabrina was okay. Her dad spoke to me about being concerned about the dog and wanted the dog put to sleep. I explained to him that I could not do that and that the dog was tied up on his own property, and it was unfortunate that Sabrina got too close. Up till this incident, I did not know the dog even existed and never had a complaint from anyone on the dog before. The dog is always tethered outside or inside the house. I did not give a fine to the owner because the dog was tied on his own property. I understand the parents' frustration, but the owner of the dog is also frustrated because they go over and above to keep their dog away from anyone. At meeting the dog, he was barking but very mellow at my approach. I personally think it's a bad situation that happened to all good people.
Thank you. Chief?
This is a preliminary report that was prepared by Officer Robert DaCosta, and was the basis for a follow-up investigation. If Robert was here today, he'd testify that on 5 July 2013, he was working the 1500 to 2300 shift assigned to patrol. Received a dispatch call from patrol to respond to 599 Reservoir Road, take a report of a dog bite. It happened at 10:34 hours. Upon arrival, he was met by Raymond Deli's Sabrina. She was the victim of the dog bite to her left leg, left shoulder. Ms. Raymond Deli advised the officer that she was at a friend's house at 882 Flat Hill Road to look at a boat. She went into the backyard there. There was a dog that jumped on her and bit her. Raymond Deli then told her mother to take her to the hospital, where she received 10 stitches in her left leg. The officer advised Mr. Raymond Deli that he would take a report and speak with the party at Flat Hill Road with the animal control officer. The officer arrived at 882 Flat Hill Road, was met by Beatty William, who was the owner of the dog. Beatty advised the officer that he was up on the porch and did not see what happened. Beatty also stated that the dog was on a leash. The officer advised Beatty that he'd be taking a report and be talking to the animal control officer. He contacted the animal control officer and she responded to take that complaint. I followed up this complaint and obtained some statements from the parties involved. Sabrina, in a statement to me, described the events of the incident that took place on 5 July 2013. She said that she was with Nick Jones. She said she and Nick were doing pull-ups on a pull-up bar that was mounted between two trees on the property line between Nick's land and William Beatty's land. But she said she believed the trees were actually on Beatty's property, and he was the person who mounted the bar on the trees. Sabrina said that she was dressed in her bathing suit at the time. Sabrina said that while doing pull-ups, Beatty, who was standing on the second floor balcony in the rear of the house, called to her and Nick. She said he asked them to come take a look at his boat. Sabrina said he wanted them to look at some damage to the boat caused the evening before when he was lighting off fireworks. Sabrina said that she and Nick began to walk in the direction of the boat. She said as soon as she began to walk across the yard, she said Beatty's pit bull was charging towards her. Sabrina said that the dog was on her immediately. She said she turned quickly away from the dog, but it jumped on her and bit her in the shoulder. Sabrina said that the dog then bit her on the inner thigh. She said Nick had to pull the dog off her. Sabrina said that Nick pulled the dog off her. In a rush of adrenaline, she ran to the porch below where Beatty was standing, and halfway up the stairs, she said she was holding her hand on her thigh, trying to stop the bleeding. She said she called up to Beatty and told him that he needed to take her to the hospital. Sabrina said that Beatty just stood there staring at her and made no remarks, so she turned to Nick and told him he needed to take her to the hospital. Sabrina said that Nick ushered her to his house, and Nick's father, Nathan Jones, put her in a vehicle, and rushed her to the emergency room. Sabrina said that she never heard from Beatty after the incident. She said on 21 July, Sunday afternoon, while attending the Lake Shirley barbecue, she happened to be on the lake in her boat. Sabrina said that she saw Beatty in his boat, so she approached him. She said that she asked him why she had not heard from him. He told her that he didn't know what to say, and then told her that he had received a document from her family attorney. He told her that he had ripped it up and threw it away. Sabrina said that she was angered by this and drove off. At that time, Sabrina and her father offered some photos of her injuries, which I do have with me, and I can enter it into evidence if that's required or requested by the board. On 31 July, I interviewed Nicholas Jones at his home. I asked him to describe the events of 5 July 2013 relating to this complaint. Nicholas said Billy Beatty called him and Sabrina over to look at his boat. Nick said that Billy was standing on the second floor of the porch that is attached to his garage, the garage not being attached to the house. He said that you could see Billy's boat from that porch. Billy said to Nick that he damaged the front of his boat on July 4th when he was setting off fireworks from the bow. Nick said that he walked over with Sabrina. He said he walked 2 steps up when the dog came from the other porch, the porch that is attached to the house. He said that the dog was on a long leash. Nick said that the dog was on Sabrina. He said it happened quick. He said the dog was on her back. Nick said that he thought the marks on Sabrina's back were from the dog's claws. Nick said he grabbed the leash excuse me, and pulled the dog off her, but the dog already chewed on her leg. He said Sabrina ran up the stairs towards Billy and said, "I definitely need to go to the hospital," quote unquote. Nick said he ran up the stairs after Sabrina. He said that Billy passed him on the way down the stairs and grabbed the dog. Nick said that Billy took the dog back to the porch and may have put him in the house. He wasn't sure about that. Nick said that he took Sabrina to his house, wrapped up her leg, and then he and his father drove her to the hospital. On 1 August 2013, I interviewed Billy Beatty in the presence of his mother, Patricia Beatty. I asked Billy to describe the events of 5 July 2013 relating to this complaint. Billy told me that he was on the porch that is attached to his garage. He said he sleeps in the room above the garage. He said that he saw Nick Jones and his girlfriend Sabrina walking through his yard heading towards his boat. Billy said that he yelled to them, "What are you doing?" in an authoritative questioning tone. Billy said that Nick was told not to enter on his property. Billy said that Nick and Sabrina walked back towards him as if they thought he was asking them what they were doing in an inviting way. Billy said at the time his dog was on a leash tied to the deck that is attached to the house. Billy said that the leash is long enough that the dog can almost reach the stairs on the garage porch. He said that when Nick and Sabrina walked over, the dog was already next to the garage porch. Billy said he took photos of where the dog was digging in the ground next to the garage porch and is willing to provide those as well. Billy said that when Nick approached the dog and walked by it, he told Sabrina that it was okay to pass the dog or something to that effect. He couldn't remember exactly. He said this is when the dog jumped on her. Billy said that the dog first jumped on her back and then on her leg before Nick pulled the dog off her. Billy said that the dog never bit her. He believes his claws caused the injury to the leg. He said that the injury was a cut like someone sliced her open with a knife. He said he saw the injury clearly, describing it as a big wound with fat hanging out of it. Billy said that Sabrina ran up the stairs after the dog jumped on her and said to him that she needed to go to the hospital. Billy said that he restrained the dog and Nick took her to the hospital. I asked Billy if he had a pull-up bar bolted to 2 trees. He pointed to it. The bar was between 2 trees, as Sabrina stated in her report. I asked Billy if Nick and Sabrina were doing pull-ups on the bar when he first encountered them on July 5th. He said that they were not. They were walking on a path towards his dock. Patricia Beatty, who was also present, said Nick Jones was not supposed to be on her property and has been told not to come on her property. She said this was the first time that she saw Sabrina, who she assumed was his girlfriend. Mrs. Beatty said that the dog does not bite. She said he jumps on people in a playful manner. She said that this is a bad habit the dog has, that she hasn't yet been able to break him of. Mrs. Bainey said the injury to Sabrina's leg was a laceration caused by uncut toenails. She said his nails are long and she has tried to trim them, but the tool she has is not strong enough. She said she brought the dog to the veterinarian and had his rabies shot brought up to date. She said that she intends to bring the dog back to the veterinarian to have the toenails trimmed and also intends to have the dog licensed. On 21 August 2013, I re-interviewed Sabrina at her home. Her father and mother were present. I wanted to clarify two claims that Billy Beatty made. Billy had claimed that the dog was near the staircase attached to the garage. When Sabrina and Nick approached and walked by the dog, he claimed that the dog came out to the end of its leash in response to Nick and Sabrina being on the property. Billy also claimed that the dog did not bite Sabrina. He said that the dog's claws caused a wound on her leg and back. I asked Sabrina if she could tell me the location of the dog when Billy called out to her and Nick from his garage porch. Sabrina said that the dog was on the deck, the one attached to the main house. Sabrina said that when she and Nick approached the staircase, which led up to where Billy was standing, the dog came running out after them. She said that the dog jumped on her back when she turned away and tried to bite her shoulder. I asked Sabrina if the dog's claws could have caused the injury to her leg. Sabrina said that the dog had her whole thigh in his mouth. She said that it was not his claws. Sabrina said, or then pointed to the back of her thigh where there was what looked like holes that had begun to heal. She said this is where the dog's teeth punctured her thigh. I photographed that area, and those photographs are also available if you so desire. And that is all I have.
Do you have those photos?
Yes.
I see, just for the record, that a lot of these photos are the property, and it's, as we hear more, I'm probably gonna, at least for myself, and as the other members may also, I'm gonna wanna ask kind of orientation where Sabrina and Nick were walking, where the dog was tied up, because it's not readily clear, at least.
Yes, and I think the photos are clear enough, although when I took them today, the exposure seemed to favor this bright sunlight, and consequently they're dark.
I'm going to give a couple minutes while the board gets to look at the photos and the report, and then the board will have the opportunity to ask questions of any of the people who have so far testified. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I will ask if the chief, I have a question for the chief, because this is the only time this came up. In your interview with Mr. Jones, who is not here tonight, and also in your interview with the defendant and his mom,
Yes.
You indicated that both of them said, both defendant and the defendant's mom said that Nick Jones was not to be on the property. As far as you know, did you ask why he was not supposed to be on the property? Was there...
There was, Mrs. Beatty in particular probably can speak to that. She did give me some reasons why she didn't want him on the property.
Okay.
But
I'll wait.
I didn't record it. I think it was more of a general, she kind of made a general statement about
Okay.
why she didn't allow him on the property. And
I will wait for
wasn't
their
indicated.
testimony.
I didn't feel it was important at the time, so.
Okay.
But I see the importance now.
I will ask that when the defendant has testified. I have two questions for the animal control officer, too. I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly. So there has not been, aside from this particular case, you have not had any other complaints against the dog, is that correct?
I didn't know the dog existed.
Okay. The second was there was an indication in your report and other reports about the dog that it didn't have a rabies vaccine because...
It didn't have a license.
Okay, not the license. I'm not asking about the license. I understand about the license. But they didn't have a rabies shot because, according to the report, the dog had Lyme disease.
Went into the vet sick in the Shirley Animal Hospital. And they said that the dog had severe Lyme disease, so they had to treat it. She wasn't allowed to get a rabies shot. So that was the reason she didn't have a license.
Okay. Oh,
And then-
because you can't get a license without the rabies shot
And then
either.
she went back after the quarantine, got the rabies when the dog was clear. And the Lyme disease is cleared up. They gave it a rabies, because they can't give it rabies if the dog's sick.
That's my question. Okay, so you cannot give the dog a rabies shot while it has Lyme disease.
Or any sickness. If they're sick at all, you
Fair
can't
enough.
give it.
You called the town up in New Hampshire, I believe you said? Is that true? Where the dog was or had been?
No, she told me where the dog had been living.
Okay.
And I called New Hampshire, I forget the name of the town, but they said that the dog was licensed up there up until a year ago.
That's what I'm saying. So the dog had been licensed where it previously was.
So then I wasn't really worried about rabies because I knew it had had
Right.
previous shots, but
Was there any indication to you how long the dog had been here without a license and like when the dog was moved from New Hampshire to here?
it's been over a year.
Okay,
I believe it's over a year.
thank you. I'm going to open up the board for questions for any of the four people who have testified already, if anybody has any questions.
I do not.
Nothing more than what you've asked already.
Nothing for me.
Okay. Then I will ask the defendant to come to the microphone and issue their testimony about this case.
William Beatty, 890 Flat Hill Road. It was early morning, July 5th of this year. I was up on my deck, and I noticed my neighbor Nick and Sabrina down lower part of my property past the pull-up bar, walking towards my friend that was fishing on the dock. And I told him that I'd blown myself up last night. I didn't blow my boat up. And they came over, they started heading my way. And I was sitting in a chair up there, and they had a pull-behind tube for a boat that was not inflated. It was in two pieces. One part was hanging over towards the stairs, and the other one was in front of me. So I never saw this whole thing happen. I heard it happen, and I got up, and Sabrina was coming up the stairs, and I stopped, and I looked at her leg, and they were asking me if I could give her a ride and stuff. I don't have a license or a car, so I couldn't have done it anyways if I wanted to. And that's about it. I didn't really see anything. My friend actually saw it happen, but he's not here tonight. He was down there fishing. And as when I saw Sabrina on the lake later on that year, when she came up to me, she actually was like, "I'm sorry, I don't know why my parents are doing this." It was nothing like what they were saying, what she said. And she was wicked. I apologized. I said I was sorry it happened, and that's about it. I never saw it happen. I heard it happen, but I didn't see it because of the tube that was hanging over.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Patricia Beatty. I'm the owner of the property. Bill's my son, and he was staying with me for a while. Actually, when his rabies shot was due, he was not living with me when they went. I mean, that did not come from our house. He was living elsewhere. He came down here looking for work, so he's been in 2 or 3 places. I just wanted to clarify that. But I have a concern on the inconsistencies of the reports. Is this a time to talk
Sure.
about that?
Sure.
And I also, I figured that you guys needed some orientation. I did not know what the chief just gave you, but there's some clarification on the pictures that I have about, and I don't know whether or not to just give them to you or to show them and talk about them.
Well, they're gonna need some explanation. So if you want to turn them around and explain them,
Right.
and if you just keep them, if you put them in front of you like that, and then keep them steady so that the camera may want to focus on them. I don't know if they can.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what the, how you were setting it up here.
That's fine.
Actually, can I just stand to the side? so
You
I
can, as long as
see?
you talk into the microphone. You can stand on either side. Sure. You can turn the microphone. Just pull the microphone toward you.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, all right. This is Flat Hill Road, and this is a common drive. And I have, our house is up here on this drive, and there are 2 other houses further up. The house in question that Miss Ramondelli is talking about, where she was before she came onto my property, is across this driveway, right here at Flat Hill Road. I'd like to know, and I know that I talked to you, not to anybody else here. I would like to know what made her decide to come over onto my property. The inconsistency is that she said that she was invited over by Bill, I would say. I don't know the young lady. I've never met her. I'm the owner of the property. I never gave her permission. She then came into the property and walked further down towards the water. Right here, this orientation is that driveway that you just saw, and this is directly across from the yellow house, and walked down here, going down towards the creek from their statements and Bill's statement. This is the top of the deck, and if you look down here, it shows right back down here. The deck where this picture was taken is right, this is the railing, so, and this is up on the 2nd story, and they were way down by the water. There's a camper in another picture. And that's the shot showing from the deck down to where they had entered and continued on down almost to the back side of the land. This is one taken in the opposite direction. I walked down to where Bill said that the young lady was standing, and this is a shot taken right there and up to, this is the garage, that's how far away it is, and with a, there's a pool room up there and a playroom for the grandkids and for whoever comes over for fun and frivolity, usually. And so that's how far this is, and this is where they were when Bill was up here and saw them. Now you'll notice that there is a fence that goes across here. There's also a tool shed. My house is over on this side. You can't even see, there was a comment made by the young lady that the dog was up, that's in the report, that the dog was up on the deck and came running down. And at the end of the chief's report, he had interviewed Ms. Ramondelli again, and she stated that where she was seen by Bill, that yes, indeed, that she could see the dog up here. There's no way. Like I said, I can send those back up. And I mean, that's a long distance. You can't even almost see that deck from there. On their return trip, they came down and around and back the way they came, and that would be bringing them back out here and across. This is the walkway behind the garage. This is the garage. So they had come from where they were over here. Here's the fence, and then behind the fence is the tool shed, and they came around and came down this way. And right here will be where the steps are. And I probably should have shown this one first. This is the actual garage, and all of this activity took place over there, came down here behind the garage, and the steps go up, and the deck is up there. I will give these to you for closer look if you'd like when I'm done. This also shows the dog run is attached. Well, wait a minute. That's a shot from the house that's showing the garage. And this is from the garage back to the house. So the house is here across from the side of that garage. The dog in question, the incident in question, was down here at the end of his run. I mean, he couldn't go any further. He had gone down there. Bill's friend's dog, who may have been in heat, was down with him, and Dagan was excited with him. The run is connected up here at the house, and it goes that way, or it goes all the way around the backyard in the opposite direction. But that time that's where they went. And this is just a shot of the stairs. This is a view from the stairs where Miss Ramondelli said that she came around. The dog was on this side of the tree, that she came around. He could not have gone any further. She had to have come into his space. And what we think happened was that when she came into his space, they tried to come around the stair, around here to come up here, and he may have gone laterally. But you know, he couldn't have gone any further straight. And this shows the run. And Bill held it taut. And this right here is the end of the stairs. So this is as far as he was, and right here in the dirt in front of him. And I have other pictures of when he was pulling on the thing with the other dog that shows exactly how far he was. She had to have come up into his space, and he couldn't have gone any further towards her to come up and go around. That's Dagan. A sweet dog. He's not a vicious dog. And this, I took a picture of his nails. Nails are an issue with him. You'll see this closer. He tends to chew this one. I believe it's that one. Or I'm not sure which of the two they were. Both of them are long, but he chews on one of them, and it gets a little bit sharp. Bill has since cut. It's a very difficult thing to cut his nails, and when we went to the vet the last time, we discussed the fact that they needed to be cut, and the vet did offer to do that the next time that we brought him back. Now, at that time, he was put on, a month of antibiotic because he had re-incurred Lyme disease again. So we have to go back to have him checked, and at that time is when he is going to do it. When Bill did it, it took care of some of it, but he can do it if he needs to. These are the pictures, and I'll leave them with you.
Just bring them up around to the side here, please.
I'd like to address the comment that was made about a conversation that Ms. Remendelli had with Bill on the water that's in the report. And I recall that day because as soon as they had the conversation and Bill came back to the house, he said, "You'll never believe who just stopped me," all apologetic, and "I'm so sorry that this happened," and, you know, it's my parents that are all, you know, just whatever. And in an apologetic manner. He never said, and we talked about it, whether or not any comment, I mean, I don't know why negative things are being thrown in there. The letter from the attorney in question that supposedly he said was ripped up and thrown away, I mean, we have it. I mean, that's a total fabrication because that's never even, you know, nothing there happened. One my question that I would like to have answered is what decisions Ms. Remendelli made. What was the decision? What made her come into my yard before she even was seen down back? The minute she came into my yard without permission, that was a trespass. And I have not heard, I don't know her, I have not met her, I did not give her permission. And I'd like to know how that occurred. The other inconsistency was statements that were read today. The first interview that Mr. Remendelli gave to the officer, one interview was the reason I was there was to look at a boat. Another was that we went over to go on the pull-up bar. Which one was it? What was the reason for coming in the yard in the first place? It seems like they're using the interchange that she had back with Bill after he yelled down at them, you know, "What are you guys doing down there?" when he finally saw him way forward, not up here where the bar was, not coming across my driveway, which was right here, but had gone across and all the way back down. And he yelled down at them, or her, you know, "What are you guys doing down there?" They turned around because of the distance and how far away they were to hear what he was saying and walked back up to him. And he, from what Bill told me, I did not hear this conversation, from what Bill told me, that day, which I documented at the time of any of the conversations that we had, I lost my train of thought there. The point that I was trying to make is that I believe that the comments that Mr. Remendelli is making is taken from that conversation that they had after they turned around and explained why they were in the yard. But none of them say why she came into the yard in the first place. I mean, that is the beginning point of this whole thing, is the fact that somewhere along the line, someone made a decision to come over into my yard to do whatever they were going to do until they were seen by Bill down at the back of my yard. I think there was a couple more things that needed to be clarified, but I didn't write them out. I can testify to where the dog was. The deck on the house, behind the house, not the one up on the garage, but the one on the house, is loaded with all my potted plants, and I daily go out and water them. I take 2 half-gallon jugs with me and have to go in and out and do it. I had been out, Dagan had come out, Dagan was out, And he ran down to that direction when the dog was down there. And so he was already down there. I turned around at I mean, there was no big deal. I mean, I just happened to see the Coco, who is the female dog, down there, and I knew that they were, getting friendly together. They were going to play or do whatever. I didn't give it any thought. I had turned around and gone back into the house to refill the bottles to come back out, at which time I heard Miss Ramondelli yelling, and I was on my way back to the door. So by the time I came back out onto the deck, she was going up the stairs, which she testified to that she went halfway up and then turned around when Nick came to take her down into the hospital. At that time, and Bill, I believe, I am really a little hazy about, I think Bill brought the dog in then. And it was shortly thereafter that we took those pictures for the orientation of where the dog was. He was at the end. Those scratch marks in the dirt were freshly made right at the time that he was there. He has a tendency, and we talked about his sharp nails. This is just my supposition, and by looking at the photos, I have to use the word. The dog likes to hump people on their leg, and I guess from the dog officer and police, that's not an uncommon thing for some males that are not fixed to do. That's something that he does. And I believe that when he jumped on her, that's what he had done. I mean, the other female dog had been there. There was Nick, I believe, Nick Jones made a statement, and I believe that Nick's statement was that the dog was on her back. So, Ms. Ramondelli's comment was the dog jumped on my back. One of the pictures clearly shows on the shoulder, if you look closely at the colored picture that the chief had, it does look, you can almost see the scratch mark up on her shoulder, and by jumping. And he has done it to me before. My daughter, who was here with us, took him, he jumped on my back, and then he put his arms around my legs. And basically, he just put them out around like that and tried to do his thing. And I had to take his hands away, his paws away. And in pulling forward, I believe what happened, in the excitement, because of where the razor appearing injury is, that I believe the paw with that sharp razor nail scratched her there. The other thing that I have in my confusion with the consistency of the statements on the bites, being a bite versus a scratch, was that Mr. Ramondelli has consistently in those reports commented that the dog jumped on her back and that she pulled away and turned away from him. And I question how, if the dog was behind her, jumped on her shoulder and also jumped on her leg, how he could get his head around to bite at the front of her leg if the dog was in back of her. That's really more just the dynamics of it when you think through on where the mark was on the shoulder coming down that way, and the laceration around the side. And even though this one was a sharp nail, the others were still a little bit longer, and they could also make marks. He's a sweet dog. He's not my dog. He's my son's dog, but it is my property, and I'd like this to be seen fairly. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'll open up to the board.
Yeah, I had a couple. So you always restrain the dog, or does it run free at all times, at any time? Or?
The dog has never, ever. When Bill came to stay, it's a strange area for him. So there's a leash law too. Just for the dog's own safety, he's never, ever run free, not once. and you can see how he's hooked up on the end of that run. I mean, that's a heavy-duty latch, and he's never been off that run, ever.
So he's got a history of jumping on people?
Well, he doesn't do it all the time, but that is a habit. You know, I mean, dogs have that habit, and he's one of them that he does. He's actually back down on it, and I think it's really more so when there's a dog in heat, and also a veterinary tech friend told me that they tend to do that if someone is having the period or had sex. You know, I mean, it's that smell, it's that animal instinct that the dogs respond to. I'm not defending the fact that he does it, but he's a dog, and, you know, I understand, and I've been told. I was surprised that they do it, you know, on a regular basis, and so.
So, were you surprised by the incident? Were you taken totally off guard, or?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Were you surprised to hear the dog had attacked somebody or jumped on somebody or injured somebody?
Surprised?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so, because he's never injured anybody. And I just hesitated because of the word attacked. I didn't see it as, you know, when he's jumped on me, I never saw it as attacking. It wasn't an expectation. So I was surprised at the whole incident, and I was more than surprised. I was really very upset that it even could get to that point where it would happen, because somebody that did not have authorization was in my yard. Somebody I didn't know, a teenager. One of the reasons that Nick isn't supposed to come over is he's a teenager who thinks he's 30 years old, and he comes when we have gatherings, when somebody pulls up the driveway. The joke came at one point that, you know, how long is it going to take, you know, for him? And he's just had to be told not to be there. Not that he obeys that. I mean, not that he obeys that. And I'm sorry that if he thought that he could give Sabrina, Miss Ramondelli, the permission to come, but I'd like to know what the reason was before they even came across that driveway into my property. And it does not make sense to me that it had anything to do with any of the reasons that are written in these reports, because that conversation never happened until they were addressed down back of my yard, when Bill called down to them and said, "What are you guys doing down there?" And they turned around and walked back up. I think, you know, a combination of trying to be closer to be able to talk, because you have to practically yell from that distance. And then they had whatever conversation, but every reason that she said she was there ensued from that conversation, not before she came into my yard. And so the fact that she came in without any reason that I know of, and that she wasn't invited in, and when she stepped over the line from the driveway, that was the beginning of the trespass.
I have couple of questions.
Sure.
The first one is, you testified that you were watering your plants on the deck, but you were inside refilling when the actual incident.
I never saw actually what happened.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
But before then, when you were outside, did you hear your son call to them, asking them?
Nope.
Okay, so you were.
I did not hear that. Bill, that was the comment that Bill told me immediately after the incident, when I went and I said to him what happened. You know, describe what happened to me with pen and paper, and I wrote that down.
Okay.
I wrote what he said to me at the time. What I saw was the dog down there. I did not see people in that area, but I wasn't watching for that either.
Sure.
You know, I was out watering my plants. But I knew that he had gone off the deck because I had tied him outside, and he had gone down, and I knew that Coco was down there and that they were playing. So,
Mr. Jones, who was with Ms. Ramondelli, where is his house? Is he a direct neighbor of yours?
it's the first picture in that pile that I sent up to you. It's that yellow house that sits right on, it's at the Flat Hill Road. There's a common drive that goes up. You go up, I'm on the left. His house is on Flat Hill Road at the beginning of,
Okay, I see it.
so they were over there doing whatever they were doing, and she chose to drive across that driveway into my yard. And according to her statement, they stopped. On that second picture, there's a picture that shows where that bar is. She states that one statement that I read was that they came over to be on the bar. And somewhere I heard that that's why they were on the property. And another statement was to see a boat. I still haven't heard from her why she came in the first place. Because nobody talked to her. She had no conversation with anybody at my house, with me, with anybody. We had a friend there, and nobody talked to anybody before she arrived on that property.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody from the board have any other questions for anybody? I have a question for Mr. Beatty, if you would come, can you tell us how long you've had the dog?
I got the dog when he was 8 weeks old. I've had him my whole life, his whole life.
In New Hampshire?
Yeah, I bought him in New Hampshire. I used to own a house in New Hampshire.
Any issues with anywhere else?
No.
That the dog has been?
No.
Were you ever under the impression that, well, let me ask a different question. Was the dog restrained why was the dog restrained?
Because he'd take off.
Okay, so for running?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever get a feeling that,
I used to keep him restrained in New Hampshire because I had bears and moose and everything. I couldn't let him run around up there.
Okay.
So he's always been like that his whole life. I had 3 other dogs that I could let outside and they were fine, but he'd take off and go run. He's not neutered, so he tends to run if he's free.
Sure.
So he's always been roped. He's on a climbing rope.
Did you ever get the impression at any point in his life that he may be a danger to anybody?
No, he's jumpy. And new people that he meets, I have to introduce, because he'll jump up on them.
What's the size? I can't tell the size.
He's 75 pounds.
About how high? Okay.
That's all.
On that day, was it July 5th?
Yeah.
So what was your interaction? I just want to hear from you again. What was your interaction with Ms. Ramondelli and Mr. Jones? Tell me every incident that you, from the time you saw them till the time the dog incident happened.
Okay. I looked down. I was sitting in a chair up there, and I looked down and I could see them. They were past the pull-up bar. I don't know if you can see the pull-up bar in there. A little bit past that, like almost in line with the fence.
How far from you at this point, approximately?
100 feet, 120 feet maybe.
Okay.
And I yelled down at them, "What are you guys doing?" And then they came towards me. I was watching Mike fish off, my dog, and they came towards me, and then they walked down below, and I couldn't see down over. I was sitting down, and then I heard commotion, and that's when she came up the stairs. I never got to see the thing because the tube was hanging over on both sides. So I never saw the incident happen. I just heard the commotion, and she came up the stairs.
So the extent of your conversation was, what are you doing?
Well, I said I blew myself up last night when I was lighting fireworks off my boat, but I didn't blow my boat up.
Now, you said this to them because you know Mr. Jones?
Yeah, he lives next to me.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
That's it.
So because it was asked, and I will ask, because it was asked through the board, I will ask Ms. Ramondelli if you can, again, explain what, if someone else's new is coming up, then I have to swear this person in, because this person wasn't sworn in. So if you would come to forward and state your name
Nicholas Jones,
and your address,
878 Flat Hill Road.
please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Well, if he's going to, I'm going to let him testify first before you answer the question I just asked. So if you have something new to add of what happened that day, this is the time.
When we had walked over across the street we had originally walked over to use the pull-up bar because it's only like 15 feet off the road, the little dirt road in between us. And we were down there and I heard Billy yell up to me, or yell down to me, "Hey, check this out. I almost blew the front of my boat off last night." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And he's like, "Yeah, you can see it from up here." And he pointed down towards the water. And that was initially why we headed over towards the stairs going up to the pool room, the game room. And that's pretty much all I have that's new. But
So did he not say what he's said, what he's testified here, that he said, what were you doing down there?
no, he had just said, "Hey, come check this out. I almost blew the front of my
That was
boat
the first
off
words you
last
heard
night."
from him, was
Yeah.
that? And the second thing I have is the pull-up bar that you're talking about. Whose property is this bar on?
It's on theirs.
Okay. And do you regularly go on using the pull-up
Well,
bar? And do they
yeah,
know that?
it's kind of like at the end of both of our driveways put together, and it's only a couple feet off the road. I don't regularly use it, but she wanted to do pull-ups, and it was there. So
Okay. So then, Mike,
I'm sorry, your question again?
what caused you to go onto their property?
I wanted to do pull-ups. I was in his house and I was like, "Nick, I want to do some pull-ups." And he used to have a pull-up bar and he was like, "Well, I don't have it anymore, but there's a pull-up bar in between two trees out there." And I was like, "Okay." So we were doing pull-ups and I didn't go down by the water. I didn't go anywhere near the water. I hadn't even looked at the boat. There was no one fishing. I know that there was somebody else there because when I went to the top of the deck after the dog had attacked me, another man came out from the pool room upstairs, and he was there. I didn't say anything to him. I didn't know who he was, but I did not go near the water. And the first thing that Billy said to me was not, "What are you doing?"
What is the first thing he said to you?
He said, "Hey, I almost blew up the front of my boat last night. You can see it from the top deck."
Okay. How long did the whole incident take?
It was
From
short,
start to finish?
like
5-10
yeah,
minutes.
maybe 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
Not how long from the time you were on the pull-up bar, from the time the dog made contact with you to the time you testified that Mr. Jones grabbed him and had to do whatever he did to take him off. How long was that?
The dog bit me, and it bit me right away, and as soon as it finished, he grabbed him off of
It
me.
was probably like 6-7 seconds.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for anybody? Okay, the complainant can issue a final statement, a summary statement if they would like. I guess you're the complainant, but anybody in your party can make the final concluding statement.
Yeah, Sam Ramondelli, 599 Reservoir Road. I just wanted to reiterate, you have the pictures. Tomorrow you will have the doctor's report. I'm sorry again that we didn't bring that here tonight, but I'll have it here first thing tomorrow morning. I mean, again, this is the first time I've seen these people, never heard from these people. I mean, don't insult our intelligence here with nails. These are not nail scratches. You can see the dog's complete mouth starting on her left shoulder. Then the dog dropped down. Yeah, you can see, you can bring her up here right now. You can show this way if she wants to see. Because she's never called or wanted to see any of this before. And this happened July 5th. Putting it mildly, disappointed beyond words. I personally would like this dog put down. We have a Connor fund in this town, and I'm sorry for Connor, and I'm sorry for his family, because I almost had a Sabrina fund here. Remember, I don't think we'd be talking about this if Sabrina was dead. I'm glad we're talking about this, because my daughter is alive, okay? My daughter does have these scars that will live with her for the rest of her life, and she's a young girl. She's not a boy, you know what I mean? You know, nylons, skirts as we go through life. Like I said, don't tell me about nails. And remember this too. Everything has surfaced since this dog attacked my daughter. The dog wasn't licensed. How did it get licensed in New Hampshire if it had this Lyme disease? These are questions not for me to ask. These are questions for somebody else to ask, because I would like the answers to that. You say you have a license in New Hampshire. Did he, the dog? And I don't know if it's a male or a female. Don't come here and talk on TV or at this board and insult your intelligence and say about the dog humping. I mean, come on now. You have the pictures, you'll have the report. My daughter doesn't lie. This man, you got Mr. Jones. Sorry that the two neighbors might not get along, but this young man, time after time, in any reports, she stated, it's never changed, that he said, come over, see what I did to my boat, 4th of July. Didn't know that fireworks were legal down Lake Shirley, but evidently for Mr. B, they were that night. He is admitted to doing fireworks, so maybe the chief can get him on a fireworks. The dog wasn't licensed. The dog officer told me that that dog could be fined. Nothing has happened to these people or that dog since July 5th. That's where my disappointment lies. That dog has more rights than my daughter. And I'm just going to leave here stating that you spell dog D-O-G. And I know you people know how to spell, not G-O-D. Look out for my daughter's rights, and not so much my daughter's rights. Again, I'm here so this doesn't happen to another Lunenburg resident. I've lived in Lunenburg for 34 years. I had a business here for 30. I love this town. I love most of the people that live here. We've never, ever had this problem. Hoping for some satisfaction here, and again, thank you for tonight.
Thank you. A closing statement from the defendant.
I'm just, Bill Beatty, 890 Flat Road. I'm just sorry this whole thing happened, and if she didn't come on my property, it wouldn't have happened. My dog's never ever done anything like this before, and I'm sorry. That's it.
Okay. I think at different points in this, the public could ask questions. So I'm going to ask if anybody from the public has a question for anybody before I close the hearing. Okay, let's record show that nobody stated that they had any questions. Now I have a question for the board, and the question is, Mr. Amendelli does not have the doctor's report. If we want that to be put into evidence, if we think it has information that will sway this, then we'll have to stay this hearing and continue it next meeting. Or if you think that you've heard enough from everything and the report will not, then we can make it close the hearing now and go on to deliberation. I just wanted to point that out. And everybody knew the hearing was tonight, I will say that, and everybody was given notice that the hearing was tonight. Any opinions?
I guess I'm struggling with whether it'll make a difference or not, or if we assume that there is a bite versus a scratch, which would probably be the worst case situation coming from that. And if we have the discussion based on that, we may find something. And then at the end of the discussion, we could certainly hold off or adjourn, recess the hearing to another date at that point. Unless there's something in the doctor's report that is totally unexpected, I don't believe that the report on whether it was a bite or a scratch or undetermined would sway my decision.
I would agree
With
that I'm not sure that it's going to have a huge impact.
Mr. Toll? Okay. I would agree with both of those, and also I would just point out, as I did, that everybody was properly notified that tonight was going to be the hearing, so I think we will go ahead with deliberation, and then I will, as chair, I will close the public hearing and open the board up for deliberation. So the first point of deliberation is to decide, and we have two choices, given this is a dangerous dog complaint, whether we dismiss the complaint or that we deem the dog a dangerous dog. That is the first item before us. And I will open it up to the board.
Mr. Chairman, do we have any further definition in the statute of what a dangerous dog is? Because I didn't see that in...
I don't believe there is. I don't know if either the chief or the animal control officer could speak to that, but I did not see anything that defined that.
Is there a definition? Yeah. Okay, so all right, so let the record show, because they didn't come to the mic, that the animal control officer and the police chief both said that, to their knowledge, there is no official definition of a dangerous dog, which leaves it up to this board to decide that. Please.
I believe it's all under one definition, because it's under barking dog, dangerous dog, it's all under one, like,
Well, nuisance is different than dangerous, so.
no, I know,
Okay.
but the barking, it's all under one general thing. Biting is in the same, injury is in the same chapter. I don't know if there's any different definition.
Again, I apologize, like I stated earlier, for not bringing that, but my wife is on the way here with that discharge paper that says dog bite. She's on her way here, so we were on Reservoir Road, shouldn't be long.
Okay.
And again, I'm sorry, we left at home. Of course, we knew about this meeting, and like I said, we grabbed pictures. Actually, we got halfway up the street. I said, geez, I forgot the pictures. So we turned around and got the pictures. She got the pictures. We flew up here, forgetting the discharge paper, which my wife, again, will be bringing up.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Where are the pictures that Mr. Emidelli submitted? Are they down on this side?
They're
or are
in
they
the
here?
blue folder.
They're in the blue folder? Okay.
See?
Okay, we can continue the deliberation. We won't come to any conclusion until the report is here. I'll allow that at least, but we can continue discussing the case.
Mr. Chairman, I'm struggling with this because knowing how dogs can act, a dangerous dog versus a nuisance, dangerous seems to be very strong word without further information, and the discussion about whether a dog gets more than one bite. To how do you define something as dangerous? And I'm not clear with that based on experience. And I'm not negating anything that is caused to Ms. Raimondelli for what's gone on, but I'm struggling with the definition of a dangerous dog, regardless of why somebody's on a property or not. I think our focus needs to be the focus of the dog versus the activities of other people. But if the dog is restrained on a property and somebody goes onto that property, I question about whether the dangerousness continues and whether it has to be what goes on with that as well.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak to that?
Certainly one point.
The only point I wanted to make is that nuisance really relates to barking under the statute, and really there isn't discussion of anything other than barking.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we do, I would clarify that according to the statute, and I should have been more clear, I'm reading off our predefined policy here on these things. But because this is a dangerous dog hearing, we could dismiss the complaint, we could say the dog is a dangerous dog, or we could say that the dog is a nuisance dog. So we actually have that second one. Legal definitions?
Yes.
Wow. Sure. So I'll invite town council up.
Thank goodness for iPhones. The definition section appears to be in section 136A of the relevant chapter. It's chapter 140. And I'll read for you what I've have here for the definitions from the General Laws website. Okay. And I'd be happy to hand this up, my phone as well. You promise if my wife calls, you'll just hand it back. So, dangerous dog. Dangerous dog
what is the section again?
This is, let me just flip back up here. It's 136A of chapter 140.
Yep.
Okay. A dangerous dog is a dog that either, and this is Romanet 1, without justification, attacks a person or domestic animal causing physical injury or death, or, number 2, behaves in a manner that a reasonable person would believe poses an unjustified, imminent threat of physical injury or death to a person or to a domestic or owned animal. Would you like me to read that again? No.
Sure.
So dangerous dog is a dog that either, number 1, without justification, attacks a person or domestic animal causing physical injury or death, or, number 2, behaves in a manner that a reasonable person would believe poses an unjustified, imminent threat of physical injury or death to a person or to a domestic or owned animal. That's dangerous dog. And we'll go down to the definition for nuisance dog. A nuisance dog is defined as a dog that, number 1, by excessive barking or other disturbance, is a source of annoyance to a sick person residing in the vicinity. Or, number 2, by excessive barking, causing damage or other interference, a reasonable person would find such behavior disruptive to one's quiet and peaceful enjoyment. Or, number 3, has threatened or attacked livestock, a domestic animal, or a person, but such threat or attack was not a grossly disproportionate reaction under all the circumstances.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ebersol.
based on that first definition, certainly the first clause without justification attacks, and then I think it gets to the point of the question of attack versus jumping, and whether that constitutes an attack at that point, or whether a person reasonably believes there may be injury. That is leading me to more of a dangerous finding than before.
That is, I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
That I'm leaning closer to a dangerous dog finding based on that definition and the facts in the case as presented.
I would say it's a lot of conflict in how I look at this. On the one hand, it's a dog is restrained on its owner's property, not accessible to people who shouldn't be near that dog. That impacts it. The other side of it is, of course, that there's, physical injury to this girl. Questionable if it's scratch, bite. I mean, as you're looking at the pictures, it may well be bite. We'll see what the doctor's report says. If a dog is going to even playfully jump on somebody or in another manner and do damage to them, that's of concern. My first thought was that I would move to dismiss the complaint. However, in consideration of the potential for the biting, I am more inclined to deem the dog dangerous and then caution, what the next steps would be.
You still have that up, that definition? Can you read the last definition of nuisance dog, please?
Thank you. I'll read the definition of nuisance dog. Is that what you would
Please.
like?
Just the last, just number 3.
Number 3 is a dog that has threatened or attacked livestock, a domestic animal, or a person, but such threat or attack was not a grossly disproportionate reaction under all the circumstances.
The reason I asked that is because between that and number 1 of a dangerous dog, as a dog owner, if I was to find the dog quote, guilty of any of these classifications, certainly it would be that one, number 3 of a nuisance dog. From what I hear, especially since by the injured party's own recounting, that the whole thing took 6 or 7 seconds. That's how long it takes a dog to jump and get down or jump and stay up until you get them down. And I do not, of course the injuries are horrible to look at and certainly saddening to see, but I don't see any other incident with the dog. I don't see any evidence of any other even aggressive behavior of the dog. And we've all heard about those kind of things where dogs grip somebody and do not let go, and you have to literally beat them to let them release. This was not that. The dog was gotten off the person seemingly quickly, and again, not understating the injuries at all. So I'd be more, and the fact of who is on whose property is a little bit relevant, but not terribly relevant to me.
Well, okay.
I mean, at least in the injury part of it. So,
Part, sure, but if you
well,
look
because
at-
the reason I say it's not terribly, because we're not going to come, I think we have to agree that we're not going to come to the bottom of the fact that the complainant is saying that they were invited and the defendant is saying they weren't. So, there were 3 people who witnessed what happened.
It's irresolvable.
Right, and we're not going to get to the bottom of that.
But the point I was going to make was that you can find this dog dangerous, and the remedies can be humanely restrain and/or tether the dog. which is the condition it's already in.
Right.
So, where the dog is, where the person was on the property of the property owner in relation to the dog is relevant in this case. If it's already tethered, it's already restrained, you have every opportunity not to make contact with the dog. So,
Can I ask what the difference between nuisance and the other is in terms of the remedies, or are they the same 4 remedies regardless?
No, they're not the big one is really off the table.
Oh, it's actually 7.
There are 7 things that,
Right.
if the dog is dangerous, the last one being that the dog would be euthanized, but you cannot euthanize a nuisance dog.
Okay. Because I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Alonso that it feels more like the definition of nuisance when you talk about that it's not grossly. I mean, the injury is severe, okay, or at least the injury is unfortunately more than minor. But the activity of the dog, I don't believe is grossly overwhelming, and I think the behavior of the owner in terms of tethering the dog as it is now certainly is a factor. So I would be inclined to lead towards the nuisance category, and then look at the remedies that are appropriate in that space.
And we've just been presented the hospital report.
and it indicates dog bite, for the record.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have read that in.
Mr. Chairman, so going back to without justification attacks or threatened or attacked, not grossly disproportionate reaction, I see that not grossly disproportionate reaction.
Proportionate,
Thank
yes.
you. Reaction would be talking about somebody teasing a dog, and that if the dog attacked as a result of that, that's not disproportionate. I don't see any interaction between Ms. Raimondelli and the dog proceeding to the attack, so I still think that we're looking at without justification attacks. And that's why I would lean towards the dangerous dog. But again, I'm along with Mr. Matthews as far as the restraint would be the remedy, and possibly some additional restraint if it leaves the property would be where I would be going at that point.
Well, that's different phase, so we have to
Right.
make the determination first.
And it goes back to, I think Mr. Ebersol alluded to it, it's, the first bite can be a fatal bite in some cases. The first bite can be a major inconvenience and major pain. In this case, we need to be cognizant of all that. So in this case, the first bite was significant to the girl involved. Luckily, no more so than temporary burden and pain. So just as far as considering dangerousness of this dog. So, if there's bites involved, as per the report from the doctor. So again, this is very much tempered by the fact that the dog was secured, the dog was in private property, the dog should not have been anywhere near people or vice versa. But the bottom line is, someone else could come into the situation, a mailman, UPS guy, whatever, the wrong time, and we could have the situation. So there's some danger here whether it was unprovoked. As far as we know, there's been no indication that it was provoked, other than being on the property. So I'm leaning toward, again, it's a challenge, but I'm getting toward a dangerous dog finding. And again, looking ahead, I would agree with Mr. Ebersol for next steps, but
Mr. Toll, anything further?
I guess I could, I guess it kind of hinges on the definition of provocation. If the dog is tethered and knows the end of its tether and you come within that space, is that a provocation? I'm leaning towards nuisance, but I can understand the point of my colleagues and can go that direction. Mr. Chair, to move things along, I move that we deem the dog a dangerous dog.
second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? No. I vote no. Okay, so now that it is deemed that, so these are the options we have. If the hearing officer deems a dangerous dog, the hearing authority shall order one or more of the following, and I will just read them into the record. These are all part of Chapter 140, Section 157. 1, that the dog be humanely restrained, provided, however, that no order shall provide that a dog deemed dangerous be chained, tethered, or otherwise tied to an inanimate object, including but not limited to a tree, post, or building. 2, that the dog be confined to the premises of the keeper of the dog, provided, however, that, quote, confined, unquote, shall mean securely confined indoors or confined outdoors in a securely enclosed and locked pen or dog run area upon the premises of the owner or keeper, provided further that such pen or dog run shall have a secure roof, and if such enclosure has no floor secured to the sides thereof, the sides shall be embedded into the ground for not less than 2 feet, and provided further that within the confines of such a pen or dog run, a dog house or proper shelter from the elements shall be provided to protect the dog. 3, that when removed from the premises of the owner or the premises of the person keeping the dog shall be securely and humanely muzzled and restrained with a chain or other tethering device having a minimum tensile strength of 300 pounds and not exceeding 3 feet in length. 4, that the owner or keeper of the dog provide proof of insurance in an amount not less than $100,000, insuring the owner or keeper against any claim, loss, damage, or injury to the persons, domestic animals, or property resulting from the acts, whether intentional or unintentional, of a dog, or proof that reasonable efforts were made to obtain such insurance if a policy has not been issued. Provided, however, that if a policy of insurance has been issued, the owner or keeper shall produce such policy upon request of the hearing authority or justice of the district court, and provided further that if a policy has not been issued, the owner or keeper shall produce proof of efforts to obtain such insurance. 5, that the owner or keeper of the dog provide to the licensing authority or animal control officer or other entity identified in the order information by which a dog may be identified throughout its lifetime, including but not limited to photographs, videos, veterinary examination, tattooing or microchip implantations, or a combination of any such methods of identification. 6, that unless an owner or keeper of the dog provides evidence that a veterinarian is of the opinion of the dog is unfit for alterations because of a medical condition, the owner or keeper of the dog shall cause the dog to be altered so that the dog shall not be reproductively intact. Or 7, that the dog be humanely euthanized. Those are the options we have, one or more of those. So again, I would open it up to the board for this phase.
So my main point for deeming a dog as dangerous is to heighten the awareness of the trouble this dog can wreak if left to its own devices, and if people are allowed by your devices of their own to come into access to the dog, come into contact with the dog. So I am more than satisfied with maintaining that the dog be restrained as he currently is. Make sure that, people coming into your property need to understand the dog can be excitable, but as far as I'm concerned, I think that is adequate for the current situation. On a side note, there is an opportunity here if we decide that the dog should be neutered. I would just suggest, given the statements you made about the dog, the troubles you've had with this dog, jumping, running, humping, those go away if the dog's neutered. And I know there's hesitance by some folks to neuter their animals. It makes for a much more docile and friendly and controllable dog. So on a side note, I'm not asking at this point for this to be included, but I would really suggest you look into it.
I couldn't have said it better, and I wholeheartedly agree with both points.
The only concern I have is removing the dog from the premises and how that will be handled, and whether there should be the requirement that it be restrained at that point as well. Since we don't have a leash law in town, we have a law that if a dog is running, it's considered a nuisance, and we would have to deal with that. But I'm concerned that since the dog is as excitable as the dog is, that there should be some restriction to make sure that the dog is restrained if it leaves the property as well.
Okay? That would make sense. You would hope that's already the case, but just to formalize it. Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, well,
The other reason why I'm talking about this too is that I don't want this to happen again, but we are creating a record for the future for this dog, and we want to make sure that the dog is made sure that they take care of the dog the way to avoid the situation in the future.
okay, then I will entertain a motion if somebody would make one.
I would move that we implement option 1 as you read, and was it option 3 on removal from premises?
Yes.
And option 3 as read by the chair.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Only because I didn't believe the dog to be dangerous. That is my no vote. And the dog is already tied up. Okay, so what do we have as far as, so that is the findings of this public hearing, but there are some final things because the defendant has the right to appeal. Do we,
So an order will be drawn up based upon the decision of the board this evening. First, that the dog be humanely restrained, provided, however, that no order shall provide that a dog deemed dangerous be chained, tethered, or otherwise tied to an inanimate object, including but not limited to a tree, post, or building, and that when removed from the premises, the owner of when removed from the premises of the owner or the premises of the person keeping the dog shall be securely and humanely muzzled and restrained with a chain or other tethering device having a minimum tensile strength of 300 pounds and not exceeding 3 feet in length. So that order will be drawn up. It will be sent to you certified mail. You have 10 days from receipt of that order to file an appeal, and there will be language in the order that identifies what your rights of appeal are, but they are through the district court. So that you can expect to receive that within the next 5 to 7 days. And then you'll have 10 days after that if you wish to appeal.
are you clear? Is everybody clear on that? Okay. That concludes this dog complaint hearing. I appreciate everybody who came forward and testified, and to the chief and the animal control officer, thank you for your presence and your reports.
More time for dog hearing.
Excellent.
Jackie, can you provide a copy of that and send it, just so we have it as part of the report, please?
I'll walk down the stairs with him.
Sure.
I wonder if it'd be possible if I could ask the animal control officer before she leaves a question, or if we could ask a question.
Not publicly, no. But you can ask her privately.
Well, maybe I could ask in a public comment, if we could just talk.
Which
Yeah.
is it not now?
Okay.
Yes, you can ask in the public comment.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, right on time, 8 p.m., the Green Community Task Force. Fuel-efficient vehicle policy, and then membership and quorum issues.
It's very efficient. We've got
So
one
let's
member.
do the fuel-efficient vehicle policy. Mr. Londa.
Good evening, John Londa, Director of Facilities for the School Department, member of the Green Communities Task Force. One of the things we're trying to bring forward for the Board of Selectmen's consideration, and that the Green Communities recommends, is adoption of a fuel-efficient vehicle policy. The policy essentially would say that when the town buys future vehicles, that fuel efficiency be considered, that it goes into a set of recommendations as far as what kind of efficiency we should expect, that is published by the Department of Energy Resources on the Green Communities website. This policy would only pertain to about 4 vehicles that the town currently owns. Most of the town's vehicles are exempt because they're either heavy-duty vehicles such as dump trucks with plows, fire engines, things of those nature. The 4 vehicles that this policy would affect, 2 of them are sedans that are currently in the school department. One of them is a light pickup truck that the school department has, and the 4th one is an administrative vehicle that the fire department uses, which is a former cruiser that was handed down to them. So while it doesn't have far-reaching effects, it would require that the town keep an inventory of its vehicles and their fuel efficiency, that inventory be updated once a year. This policy that we're recommending would have that come out of the town manager's office, where they currently keep track of all the town vehicles for insurance purposes. It would require that town departments that have vehicles that are not exempt, that they bring forward a plan to replace those vehicles sometime within the next 10-year period, and that would be going through the capital planning process. We have one vehicle that currently is exempt, it was the only one that we actually got feedback from the various departments on. This policy was staffed through the highway department, the fire department, police department, and school department. The fire department came back and said, the one vehicle that we're concerned about is our command vehicle, which is a 2007 Expedition. Its fuel rating is 14 miles per gallon combined. The DOER policy would look to see a vehicle that at least had an 18 miles per gallon rating. The DOER tries to keep that number, that rating, so there's at least 5 vehicles in whatever category we're talking about available. That category for the command vehicle would be a 4-wheel drive SUV. The Expedition in the current year model would not qualify because it's still not getting that 18 miles per gallon. There would be other vehicles conceivably that we could get, such as a Jeep Grand Cherokee or something along that line, but the Expedition with an 8-cylinder is not particularly fuel efficient, and so would not make this cut. So that would be another vehicle. While it currently is not exempt, future replacement probably would say that one would be something we would look for the fire department to look at, a fuel efficient vehicle. The other specific thing that's included in this recommended policy was the anti-idling policy. which simply states that no employee shall operate the engine of a motor vehicle unless a vehicle is stopped for a foreseeable period of time in excess of 5 minutes, unless such operation is necessary. So that would obviously cover things like cruisers that are on standby, or vehicles that are, fire trucks at a site that need to be running to be able to provide its function. But so we just don't have vehicles sitting there idling for no reason. That's essentially the highlights of it. We don't necessarily need any action from the board tonight, but we are looking to submit an application for green communities designation by October 30th at 5 p.m. So we are looking to get this policy approved sometime in October, so that it can then be submitted along with that application. We do have some other things that we're on the schedule to see the Board of Selectmen on in the future. That includes an energy reduction policy that looks at a 20% reduction in energy use for the municipal buildings, vehicles, and equipment over the next 5 years. It's a pretty substantial target. But that also is something we have to bring back and install under construction at the present time.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Londa?
Mr. Chairman, John, the proposed policy, is that similar to other communities have?
This is based upon a template that the Department of Energy Resources provides for communities that are looking to establish themselves as green communities. We have modified it slightly. We said we looked at the replacement plan, set that out over 10 years, so that vehicles that we've had for less than 5 years that we've had substantial investment in aren't being replaced prematurely. But the basic view of this is similar to other communities. And I said it is based upon a DOER template.
Thank you.
So you're not looking for us to vote on this tonight? You do not need us to vote on this tonight?
I don't need you to vote on it tonight. If there are no questions and you are ready to vote on it, we certainly would be willing to take that vote.
Okay. Does the board wish to vote on this tonight?
One of the things that we have in our policies is that if it's a substantial policy, we want to make sure that all members are here for the discussion. I know that Mrs. Bertram's not here. I'd welcome her input, assuming that she's going to be here at the next meeting. I personally support this, but I just wanted to make sure that she has some input on this as well. But I don't know if this rises to the level of substantial.
Yeah, I was going to say, for something that covers 4 cars in the community, and although we have not discussed it before tonight, it has been discussed in prior discussions with the Green Communities Task Force. I think I have an inkling that it's going to pass pretty resoundingly, so I don't think her vote is going to change the balance.
Right.
So I would be more than inclined to vote on it tonight and let the Green Communities go on their way to their next steps. So
I would agree. In fact, I'd make a motion that we approve the policy.
Second.
any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None.
There we go.
It is approved.
Thank you.
And with deference to Mr. Ibasol, I mean, I appreciate your point about having all members chime in, but I think we've seen templates of this before, so.
Okay.
We have.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Mr. Chairman, there's additional item on
Yes.
this agenda?
Yes, so we have one more item. I don't know if you're ready to talk about this, John, but it has to do with membership and quorum issues, but I think this is something for the board to discuss. And,
I'm not prepared to talk on that issue.
okay.
I mean, I will just relay what has been communicated to me by the chair of the Green Communities Task Force, and I think you probably saw the email as well. When this task force was formed a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, you actually had to appoint alternates because there were so many people that were interested in the task force. And as time has gone on and the task force has kind of moved into different areas, unfortunately, it's kind of suffered the way a lot of the boards and committees, where we just don't have, we don't have all of the positions filled right now. We have a number of staff members, I think 3 staff members, that serve as advisors to the task force, and the chair has asked that their status be transferred or converted from advisor to a voting member of the task force. It's been my position during the time that I've been here that I don't feel that it's appropriate to have staff members as voting members to committees. Certainly appropriate to have them as advisors, but not as voting members. I do understand the concern, and I think the board could just as easily resolve that by changing the membership. It's a task force that was appointed by the board. It's not established by charter or bylaw. So there was some discussion, because we are a green community, on our way to becoming a green community, that maybe we need a permanent committee. But at this point, we still have a task force that you created, and you certainly could change the makeup of that task force rather than go back to a process of appointing staff members to committees.
We have, the membership currently is, or the number of members, if it was totally filled, is 7, is that correct?
7,
And we have how many?
I believe you have
4?
3? 4? No, you have 4.
At least 4.
4 voting members and 3 advisors, 3 staff advisors.
Okay, so I'm going to take this as the jumping off point, because it has to do with quorum too. So just so people are aware, and we had this verified, according to what we've gotten from town council, is that a quorum is more than a majority, or a majority of the total membership, whether those seats are filled or not. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so they are right now, everybody has to show up to have a quorum in their thing. So I want to just at least let people know on this board, if you haven't already known it, I think everybody got that correspondence, but also people at home. And also take the opportunity to say we have 3 openings on the Green Community Task Force. And also, because we've talked about this in other regards, how many openings on the Public Access Cable Committee?
We have 3 as well.
So if anybody's out there and wants to be on the Public Access Cable Committee or the Green Communities Task Force, before we go around changing memberships of the Green Community Task Force, I'd like to at least open up the opportunity. And we've had good success when we've opened up these opportunities, that people become aware of them. Sometimes I think these memberships go unfilled only because we're not doing a good enough job of making them public, that we have openings. So if you would like to serve on the Green Community Task Force or the Public Access Cable Committee, please fill out a talent bank form. They're available for download on the website or at Town Hall. And we would love to appoint you to those committees.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that, and this is something that we're working on our policies, but that we come up with a job description of what the Green Communities does, whether it's the charter, whether it's the charge to the committee, when do they meet, so that when people decide whether they have the time or the energy to be involved, it's certainly not every week during the month. Is it once a month? Is it twice a month? What's the expected workload? Ideally, it would be good if we could identify the mix of, similar to the reuse committee that we have, is we came up with who we'd like to have on it as the skill level, just to give people an idea, so that a person will feel that they can make a contribution to the committee. It's effectively giving them the job description.
Okay. Can we do that?
We can.
And can you bring, Mr. Londa, can you bring that back to your committee, of which you're an advisor, and we'll communicate with the chair of that committee as well. But if your next meeting you can get that definition and work with the town manager to have it public, that'd be great.
Well, they do have a charge. There was a charge that you approved when we
Okay,
when
then
you
we should,
appointed.
so we should have that for announcement. And
Assuming they actually have 4 members who show up at the meeting, so therefore they can hold the meeting.
well, no, you can always hold a meeting, you just can't vote. You can hold a meeting without a quorum, you just can't vote without a quorum.
No, you can't deliberate.
Well, you can't deliberate, right.
Therefore, you can't hold the meeting. That's the concept of which we'll be talking about a little bit on the open meeting law.
All right. It's getting to be 9:15. Okay. Anything else on that 8 o'clock?
No.
8:30, EPG and New Gen Solar Project on West Street and Electric Ave, pilot agreements.
So I'll just give 1 minute, and I will come on up while we talk. You have a request before you this evening for consideration of entering into a pilot agreement for the property for the project that we have all referred to as the EPG project on West Street, Electric Ave, Pleasant Street. We've referred to it by all of those locations. The developer of our other project in town, Nugent, is either has purchased or is in the process of purchasing this project and is interested in talking to the board about the pilot this evening.
Before we do that, can we get some clarification on the PPA? Because, of course, we had a PPA with EPG, a little alphabet soup here. And there's an indication that the new owner, potential new owner, would not want to honor that PPA, that contract, and instead, well, basically walk away from it. So if we get some history on that, because where I'm leading up to is we had a town meeting vote that authorized us to sign PPAs and pilots, and they were each predicated on the other. So if there's not going to be a PPA for the EPG, now New Gen location over on West Street, Pleasant Street, then we got nothing to talk about. There's no PPA, there's no pilot. We're done. Have a nice day. Turn the page. It's over.
Okay. I don't know, do you want me to do that? You want to do that?
Well,
Doesn't matter to me.
If I might suggest to the board, what maybe we can do it this way. I was going to say is sorry, the later it gets, the lower I speak, apparently. I have been provided with an assignment agreement that indicates that the PPA that the town signed with EPG has been assigned to Nugent, a representative of which is here tonight to talk more about that. So, as it stands now, the counterparty under the PPA is Nugent. It's still a live agreement. It exists. It doesn't go away unless it can be terminated in accordance with its terms or the parties agree mutually to terminate it. So, there is a PPA that is extant right now. It exists. Through the assignment, Nugent is now the counterparty. Nugent has presented a pilot agreement that is virtually identical to the pilot agreement we did for the Chase Road project, which is Nugent's project. It's the $18-some-odd thousand for personal property for 20 years. And so the representative from Nugent is here to talk tonight about what he has said is a solution to the apparent inability of EPG to build this project out. I only know what he tells me. I have no reason to disbelieve it. The fact that EPG has assigned this agreement to Nugent indicates to me that EPG isn't confident that it's going to be able to build out this project by the December 2013 date, which is why it assigned it. It no longer has the opportunity to do that because, as I've said, the PPA has been assigned. So I would suggest that perhaps the Nugent representative come up and talk more about what's being proposed here so the board could hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Sure.
Sure.
You guys should go on TV with that. There's some good moves.
My name's Dan Poy-Dennis. I'm a Managing Director and General Counsel for Nugent Capital. And I want to thank you, first of all, for adding us to the agenda. Sorry.
Can I ask you to say your name slowly so I can hear it?
My name is Dan Poy-Dennis,
Okay,
and I'm a representative of Nugent Capital. And first and foremost, we want to thank you for adding us to the agenda so late. We know we were a late ad, and thank Attorney Holland for coming out as well. What I thought I could do is I could give you quickly an update of where what we call the Pleasant Street project is, and then tell you the path ahead and the reasons behind it, Member Matthews' point. The initial structure with the Pleasant Street project was that there was a lease with the church, right? Many of you know that. The church then subsequently filed for bankruptcy after agreeing to the PPA agreement, that you had with EPG previously. That led to a process that was somewhat ugly and time-consuming, but we are very proud and happy of the result of it. The result of it being that in order to pull the lease, or the property rather, out of bankruptcy, it has to be purchased rather than leased from the bankruptcy court, and that purchase has to happen before October 8th. The consequence of that is that there's now a purchase of land rather than what was a very favorable lease agreement to the land, which numerically is close to $200,000 of additional cost between actual land acquisition and some of the transactional costs. For example, yesterday I was on an email that had 5 separate lawyers from 3 law firms, right, to pull it out. What became very clear is that that lease agreement is not something that would work. And it's not something that could retain the site control for the project in order to make it actionable from a solar perspective within either the deadlines of the PPA or the deadlines of the emergency regulation. Luckily, because we do have the other project in town, and because we do have a PPA now with the town for that project, as well as a second PPA with the North Central Massachusetts Development Corporation, we're able to take those additional costs, kind of amortize them over the 2 projects rather than just one. And we're also able to give the town its full capacity that it was expecting between the 2 projects, albeit at one site, while also allowing a private entity to contract for 265 Pleasant Street. And just anecdotally, before I came here today, I did call them and I asked them, why is this important to you? And I spoke with David McKeon, their president, and John Harden, who also works on their energy specifically. And he said the reason it's important is because they're going to take the savings they have and they're going to allocate those savings to manufacturing jobs within the Unitil coverage area. Some of the people who work at those jobs are residents of Lunenburg. And he said, and over the next 20 years, those jobs now, or those companies rather, are going to have electricity savings. That's going to give them a competitive advantage to stay in this town, and it's going to help them create jobs. So what we're here today, I know Carrie put together a spreadsheet, right, that I think lays together, I believe Carrie put together a spreadsheet that talks about some of the savings and the economics, but what we are asking for is a pilot to be taxed at the same rate that it's taxed at the other project in town. And the result of this would be that the town has the exact same capacity under power purchase agreements. It's just at 2 separate sites, albeit they're owned by the same entity, which would be us.
But when it's all said and done, we're going to get our credits from the Chase Road project.
When it's all said and done, you would get your credits solely from the Chase Road project, but the same number of credits would be delivered to you, right? The way this works mechanically is that they'd be generated at separate sites previously. They'd go into an electricity grid, and then they would accrue to the same town accounts, right? So the net consequence to the town is that these credits would be generated, they'd be calculated or administered by the utility, and then they would come to you in a bucket, right, in a bundle, so to speak. The sole difference from that regard is that now the same number of credits would be coming from one site, right, rather than both.
But the change to the power purchase agreement you're proposing for the West Street site is you're going to reduce the credits. The value of the credits is going to get diminished when you combine them. So we end up at the credit value we get from Chase Road versus the better credit value that we were to receive from West Street.
The calculation of the credit would be different, and to the extent, one is a fixed discount to a floating rate. The other is a fixed rate with a fixed escalator. Said a different way, the one you currently have at 651 Chase Road says, whatever retail electricity is, it goes up, it goes down, it stays the same, you get a discount to that electricity. What you have on the EPG PPA says, no matter what electricity is, you're paying a fixed rate, and no matter whether that electricity goes up or down, you're going to pay more year after year. So to answer the question directly, in year 1, there would be a greater savings assuming the net metering credit and retail electricity doesn't change, right? But that's not to say that it won't change in the future. It's not to say that the discount will be greater or less in the future. That comes down to risk tolerance of the town and whether it wants to make those types of bets, right? I can tell you from deals we've done in the past, we had this exact same conversation on the 3.1 megawatt project we have operating now in the Commonwealth, where the difference between the 2 structures was actually in excess of 30 grand, not the 10 that Carrie's calculated. And their answer was, well, we'd rather just forego the 30 because we don't know what's going to happen with natural gas. We don't know what's going to happen with fracking. We don't know if fusion's going to come online in 10 years. We don't know what other types of innovations or things are going to happen. We're not in the energy trading business, and we just don't want that risk, right? So I don't know what the risk is. I don't know what it's not. I don't know what assumptions the town wants to make over time, but all I can say is they're not contracted, right? And so it is a $10,000 economic difference in year one. And for that $10,000, you would be relinquishing any and all risk. There is a corresponding point, which is doing this enables us to build the actual full size. So it's not as simple as just, or not as limited rather, to just what the net metering credit is. I mean, your town's also getting, to Attorney Holland's point, $818.47 per megawatt. The town's also getting permit fees, right, for the deals actually happening. And what we've done is come to you, said, nobody asked for it to go into bankruptcy, right? Nobody thought that was going to happen, but it did. It's where we are today. Quite frankly, we're shocked that we were able to pull it out of bankruptcy and that the judge agreed that we could buy it. I don't think anybody was expecting that. The consequence economically is large, but the way to do it from our perspective is to do this PPA breakdown. And I would argue that the net benefit to the town is greater than it was previously by virtue of the fact that we can now build full capacity on both sites, and your taxes are linked to the capacity we build, as are your permits. But if you want, I mean, I can go into a little detail about why, if that would be helpful, from the EPG PPA, you know, why we're making, because it's not limited just to that rate. I think the other instances are we just don't think that PPA can be honored, right? There's a deadline in it that says you have to reach commercial operation by December 31st. In our estimation, that's just not possible, let alone reasonable. It takes 12 to 16 months to order switchgears, to order transformers. There's $362,000 of Unitel construction upgrades for which they haven't provided a schedule, let alone commence the work. And we just don't think, in our experience of doing a bunch of these and living through that procurement right now on 651 Chase Road, that there's any possible way we can meet that deadline. The economics are different. I think we do have the risk tolerance for it. We do want to make some of these bets. I can tell you on the first 7 projects we didn't. We were on the other side of the coin, and we wanted to guarantee the savings, which is sort of the inverse of what you all are doing. Now we're willing to take a little bit of risk because we can amortize that over a full portfolio, and we're in the business of taking that risk. But finally, I mean, there's some regulatory constraints that make it very complicated to have public and private PPAs on the same parcels. So this is the solution that's been cleanly approved by Unitel that would allow the town to get the exact same capacity it had previously, that would allow them to get maximized increase to their tax base and maximize their permits. And I think anecdotally it has the benefit of the private entity that would participate in this is somebody that's also benefiting the town.
Okay, so either way, whatever happens with West Street, we're still maxed out at Chase Road. So ultimately, the PPA agreement over there is whatever it is, what it is. 3.1 megawatts, we're done. We're going to absorb every bit of available capacity Unitil has for governmental net metering credits, right?
Are you saying if, regardless of what happens with West Street, is that what would happen at Chase Road?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. So what's available currently under the municipal cap for net metering credits, and the way they do it is at an 80% of size calculation, so I've converted it into the real size, is that what's available to the town would be a maximum of 3 megawatts, 3.46 megawatts, right? What would be built right now at Chase Road would be 2.2 megawatts. Right? So what we're saying is take that capacity from Pleasant Street, add it to Chase Road, so we do give you the exact same size and max it out. There's no change to the town with respect to capacity.
Exact same size, footprint, et cetera, as approved by the planning board currently.
Exactly.
So there's no change to the neighborhood, et cetera. It all looks the same.
Zero change.
It's a little more dense maybe, but to them it's no impact.
It still honors all of the special permit, the setbacks. There would be no change to it.
Okay.
It'd be consistent with all permits.
It's going to be built at the 3 point. It's going to be more than 2.2 when you're.
It'll be more than 2.2 when the capacity is flipped over to Chase Road. Correct.
Okay. So it's going to max out again. Any governmental net metering credits will be maxed out at Chase Road.
That's correct.
So you're going to build EPG site, West Street site, sorry, and that's going to, again, you've got a private deal with somebody, North
The North Central Massachusetts Development Corporation.
Okay.
Right. For which there would be, to your point, there is no additional capacity available, right,
Okay.
to the extent we build
So
out
that
Chase
becomes a
Road.
private deal, not really, sure, it has some tangential benefits to the town, maybe, and manufacturing jobs, et cetera, for residents. But why do you need a pilot?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, I think the pilot, similar to the Chase Road project and many other in the Commonwealth, provides you with a level of certainty. I think Harold Scheid will say this, and I think others here are aware of it. The pilot rate that is agreed to in the town is among the highest I've seen in the Commonwealth. Salisbury just did one at $10,000 a megawatt. There's ones we have in other places for $8,000. It is not a extremely favorable, as we've spoken about with the town manager before, rate, but it does provide us a level of certainty. It also provides the town a level of certainty. And it takes away the volatility you can have and what the DOR may do. As I'm sure you're aware, there's been regulations that have gotten far, but not all the way through, on changing the way personal property taxes are assessed for solar in the Commonwealth to percentages of electricity savings. I mean, what we'd really like to do is get that certainty. And I think, again, I mean, just stepping back, I mean, what we're trying to do is something that I think we've been surprised to do, that we view as a solution to what at times we thought was an irreconcilable problem, right? It's a way to pull this out of bankruptcy. And while I agree on there may not be, or may be, depending how you view it, benefit to the town of the private PPA, there's certainly benefit to the town of the taxes, right? So that property right now is owned by a not-for-profit. It doesn't have the benefit of those taxes. It doesn't have the benefit of a permit fee. So it's additive, in other words, to what the town has, which means your tax base goes higher, your permit fees go higher, even if your savings, while the capacity is the same, don't necessarily go higher.
So ultimately, though, the pilot is based on actual costs. I mean, they looked ahead, said, okay, what's your tax bill going to be over the next 20 years? Divided it, figured it into enough increases, et cetera. So the number ends up being the same. If there's no pilot, the tax bill goes out. There's no difference other than accounting.
It's not necessarily true, because the benefit of the pilot is that it would supersede DOR guidance. So I've had this conversation with the assessor.
Right.
The risk of not having a pilot is that they may say, by the way, let's tax it this way, maybe in month 2, year 2, or year 18.
Sure.
And you'd be subject to that, whereas the pilot would supersede it.
Right.
So it's a risk tolerance thing, right? It's sort of, we're a financial entity. As I said to you last time when I was before you for 651 Chase Road, I just said, we need 2 things. We need the PPA, we need the pilot. And if you do that, we give you our word, despite the fact we understand it's been a long process and you're justifiably skeptical of when people promise that from this podium, that we'll buy the land, we will buy out Mass PV, we'll get the project going right away. We did those 3 things, right? And I think, again, we said that you don't have to deal with other investors. We are the investor. There's no financing, conditionality. We don't have that. There's none of that built into the pilot we're suggesting. We just have to close on this land, right? And we have a short window to do it. And if we don't do that, it goes back into the bankruptcy limbo. And what happens once it's in bankruptcy, nobody really knows.
I wanted you to step through the power purchase agreement that exists on both sites right now and how they would move forward as they stand right now. Forget about the pilot for a second. I realize the pilot's before us, but I want you to go over the power purchase agreement because, again, under what was the municipal cap, I think you stated there, but I think we've been saying is about 2 point something, the total cap.
I can go through the exact numbers if that would be helpful on the cap.
Yeah, but only as they pertain to the power purchase agreements.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So the purpose, stepping back, the purpose of the caps, right, which is the net metering system of assurance, was to ensure that the amount of net metering was bifurcated the way the DPU ordered it to be between private and public entities. Right. So they do a calculation of what the historical peak load is, or the load in an area for each utility, and say as a result of what that load is, you can do X for public, you can do Y for private. Right. What's happened in that cap is that because Unitel is only allowed to do 3.06 megawatts, again at that 80% capacity, which means 3.825 total, right? Once that's filled, there's then a waiting list, and if things fall out, you can jump in. We're first in line on that waiting list, so we have an additional 1.34 megawatts on the waiting list. But what we've already reserved through just applying with Mr. Londa's help on Chase Road is 2.26 megawatts there. And through taking assignment from EPG, 1.2 megawatts at 265 Pleasant Street, right? Because the owner of both assets is the same, That's not really the purpose of the cap, is saying, well, we want this here, we want that there. What they care about is that it's the right amount of net metering, right? So the concept would be, we're just simply taking what we've already reserved and we're shifting it to another site that we also own, right? So there is no change with respect to that. The way it matters is because the North Central Mass Development Corp is a private entity, right? And in the private caps, there's just available space left, whereas there's not in the public. So they're able to go bigger, right, than the town could by virtue of the net metering caps on the public side being maxed out, right? So again, the benefit of that is there's just a bigger aggregate capacity. And because the pilot agreement is based upon more size, more payments, because the permits are based upon more size, more payments, it's a better aggregate savings to the town.
Okay.
Right.
But that wasn't my thank you.
Right.
That was part of it. But
Sure.
my question was, what we purchase under the power purchase agreement is dictated by property, not by the cap. It says because the property is listed in each of the PPAs.
Correct.
Okay? So what exactly, how are those changing?
So that's what Kerry's math is, right? So the change would be that the deal you have, so to speak, on 265 Pleasant Street, right, which is a flat rate of 11.32 cents with an annual fixed escalator of 1.8%, would be switching to now, no matter what happens, wherever retail goes, you're always getting a 15% savings to that rate for that megawatt.
And only from Chase Road?
And only from Chase Road, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
So I am clear on this.
Yes.
So the math goes that there is no PPA because between the town and NewGen for the Pleasant Street, West Street, because we're not buying any power from you there. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay. So that enables what Mr. Matthews said at the beginning of this before you came up and actually almost immediately after Mr. Holland spoke, which is we told the town that we would enter into no pilot if we didn't have a corresponding power purchase agreement with the facility.
Right.
So therefore, if the power purchase agreement on West Street and Pleasant Street goes away and we're not buying anything from there, then we would not be entering into a pilot with that, because then we'd say, okay, so then the company, the solar company, would be on their own. They don't need the pilot, we can just tax them.
Well, I don't know that I agree they don't need the pilot, but I understand.
No, we don't need the pilot. If we were buying energy from you, the point was that the pilot is something that you want to for financial assurance, and we would trade that for buying power credits. That was our deal, and that's the way we sold it to the community.
Right, understood.
But if we're not getting power credits from the facility, then it's not terribly compelling for us to say why we should enter into a pilot for that facility.
Okay, well, I mean, I can't speak to whether it's,
Okay.
I mean, I think I understand, right?
That's what Mr. Matthews' question was at the beginning, and I wanted to step by step get there because I think there's a lot of numbers and a lot of things going on, but that is my
Sure.
understanding, and I, for the record, I personally agree with him.
Right. So I mean, I don't know that I'm the best person to speak to what the town approval would allow or what sort of flexibility they have. I mean, I'll defer to town manager or to town council.
You don't need to.
Right. But
We know what we committed to.
Right.
And we need to live by that.
Right.
Right.
It's not a legal decision. It was a decision of how we sold the projects to the community at large.
Right. I understand.
So the bottom line, the PPA for Chase Road, as, adapted, takes away the risk, all that, 10 grand first year, it's great, fine, I'm cool with that.
Right.
No problem. Let's go. Build it. Give us power. Let's make this stuff happen. We've been talking about it for 2 years.
Right.
But what I can't do is if we're not going to sign a PPA, we're not going to get direct benefit from the development at West Street, you're free to continue on. You've got a PPA in place with someone else, private entity. You're free to go forward with that, but I can't support a pilot because I told the people of this town that if there's not a PPA that we're going to benefit from, we're not going to do a pilot. And that's how it was voted at town meeting. So,
Right.
we got to live by what we say we're going to do.
So, I mean, I guess the question I would just have, though, is, I mean, and I think this is, in the event that project just doesn't go forward, right? I mean, then there's just a tax loss. I mean, you are benefiting from that PPA, right?
Understood.
You're benefiting from the project going because you're getting what'll likely be $30,000 within 30 days for a permit fee.
Sure.
You're getting in excess of $18,000 a year for the next 20, whereas now they're getting nothing, right? And I think you are benefiting in that it's residents of Lunenburg in part, right, who are benefiting from that. But I think,
there was a direct correlation.
right.
There's a direct correlation in a town meeting vote, you know, and whether or not we could legally, you know, excuse ignoring that. The bottom line is, you know, when we tell people we're going to do this based on, you know, A and B, then A and B got to happen, or else, you know, we're lying.
And also, I would say that the taxes, while it's in bankruptcy, do accrue. It's not like they go away, so they just become a lien on the property.
Yeah, it's owned by a non-for-profit, though, I think is the...
Right, well, but
I mean,
that's,
and again,
that was also found to be wrongly in that category.
Got it.
So, but
But
that's a different
there's
story.
every opportunity for the project to go forward. We're not doing anything to stop the project.
Right.
I mean, it's just, it gives a more challenge for you for financing a little bit. Right? Because you don't have a clean pilot in place. But your costs are the same. And in fact, you may benefit down the road if the DOER decides that, you know, God forbid the towns might get some revenue out of these projects. Because, you know, State House magic, it happens.
Right.
You know, that's our risk. But again, until we can have a further conversation with the town, you know, to change what we already said we're going to do, you know, I can't do it.
Yeah, understood, understood.
And, you know, if the project goes forward, great. For
Right.
you know, it's a little harder. You're this far.
Mr. Chair, are we able to negotiate a pilot a year from now?
Say that again?
Could we, if we said we're not going to do it now based on what was said at town meeting, could we come back later after further discussion and do a pilot a year from now?
I don't see anything that precludes us from
Sure.
doing that.
As long as,
If
you
all
know-
the parties were still
Yeah.
intent on doing it, sure.
If town meeting wants to, just, you know, support that, you know, we can make that case.
Do we have an estimate of the value of the West Street property that would be as built out? Because you've got the pilot here based on $18,000 a year.
Correct.
What
That's
is,
that's purely the personal property. That's not the real estate.
Right.
I have had discussions, I'm happy to share what has been told to me on the real estate side, which is that it would be somewhere between $4,000 and $5,500. I had a couple of conversations with the assessor on that.
and the pilot would cover personal property and real estate?
No.
Not real estate, just personal
personal
property.
It's personal property.
Okay. So you're saying that if it was taxes, it would be $4,000 to $5,000 a year?
No,
In
that
addition to the personal property of...
He's saying that is the real estate estimate.
Right.
Oh, all right, no, I was just talking,
The combined cost would be $22,000 to $23,000
Okay.
total.
all right.
Yeah,
But-
per the terms of the pilot and
Right,
the
but
assessment.
I'm talking about if there wasn't a pilot and we were actually doing it based on the current tax rate, what would be the taxes in the first year that we would get if we taxed it not as a pilot, but on the personal property? Do you,
And I mean, I know your mill rate, but I don't know that I'd be the appropriate person to make that calculation.
I don't have that
It
information.
would probably be less than the 18,000
Okay.
because again, I know Harold took the 20-year projection, 2.5 increase, divided that back
made it
down.
even over
Right,
the
he
20
evened it
years?
out, right.
Yeah, so
So
it's
it
very
would be more in the
simple.
beginning and less as it goes
Well,
on.
and if you go for a property tax as opposed to a pilot and the town votes a 2.5 override, then the taxes go on to this as opposed to just the residential and the
Well, that was
commercial.
the reason we chose, I think that's why we separated personal property from the real estate, so that it was not, the real estate wasn't exempted from any 2.5.
Right.
That was exactly why we did it that way.
So may I ask a question? I don't know if that's appropriate when I say it, but, sure. but I guess my question would be, so then it sounds as though you're bound by what you're permitted to approve, but it's something that we could put back on an agenda or continue to work with the assessor or the town manager or town council to try and come to some sort of terms to the extent we wanted that. It's just not going to happen now.
Right,
Right.
sure. And again, it's going to be subject, from my perspective, to town meeting vote.
Right, because that's where it was approved, at that town meeting. And during the discussion, it was clearly stated that without a power purchase agreement, there would be no pilot, and that was in the discussion very, very clearly.
Understood.
So
I've read the bill. Got it. Okay. So then, I mean, I guess it sounds like we'll try and just keep going with the project on the private side. We'll get the public over on, your PPA on the Chase Road,
yep.
and we'll just continue to work through this and try and see if we can come back before you again in the near future with an approval for a pilot.
Okay.
that sounds great.
Great.
So what's your timeline on Chase Road?
Well, we've been told that it would be commercial operation middle of February, which actually is a lot faster than we expected.
February of
14?
14?
That's right. That's right. We understand. It's a perfectly fair question, given what we've read about, maybe not been privy to, but
Okay. I know.
Can I just ask, what happens to the PPA that was signed that is no longer?
It should fall of its own, because part of the standard was that it would have to be in commercial.
That's right.
It'll probably December 31st, we'd have a party in which it would go away.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's right. The contract's still alive, so it would expire, terminate in accordance with its terms. If it doesn't get billed out by December 31st, 2013, then it can be terminated. So if what I hear is true and it can't be billed out and it doesn't sound like it will be, then I would expect it would be terminated at that point, or of course mutually terminated before that point, if that be the board's wish.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions about this item? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, general discussion regarding open meetings law and/or quorum. So, I guess we started a little bit of this as far as the quorum concerned when we were talking to the green communities. So again, just so everybody's clear, by definition, a quorum is a majority of the total potential membership body if fully staffed. So if there are vacancies, that does not change the quorum requirement. A 5-member body would require 3 people, even if there were only 3 people who had positions and there were 2 vacancies. 7-member, you'd need 4. So that is something that everybody, there was some speculation whether it changed with the actual membership of, and it does not, according to what we have gotten from town council. Open meeting law. First of all, everybody who's been certainly elected but appointed as well, right? Has to go through the open meeting law online.
No.
No, we do a conflict of interest.
They're given the open meeting law.
Okay, we're just
upon
given
swear.
that, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so everybody's given it to review.
Yeah.
I think part of the discussion that we need to have is if there are observed potential violations of it, where do they get addressed and who do they get addressed to? So, do we have an answer to... I can say that as far as to postings and as far as to agendas, that definitely lies within the town clerk. So they should be addressed to the town clerk.
Well, the town clerk doesn't enforce. The town clerk receives and posts. If a committee holds a meeting and they didn't post it, the town clerk is not authorized to enforce it. If the town clerk sees something wrong with the posting, the town clerk technically doesn't have the duty to say this isn't right, but I know that the town clerk has said that to some people in certain circumstances, and appropriately so. But if somebody posts, sort of to jump into it, an agenda that says old business, new business, that doesn't meet the specificity of the open meeting law requirement, but the town clerk doesn't enforce that. So therefore, it goes back to who does. And the selectmen, I don't believe, have the authority to do it. It technically goes to the Attorney General. But it's my belief that we shouldn't be going to the state when we don't need to, that we really should be coming up with a process by which people can do it. I called up one board to let them know that their executive session posting didn't meet the requirements, just to let them know. I wasn't making a complaint. Unfortunately, I did it after they had the executive session, so they couldn't make the change.
Right.
But there ought to be some process by which we let people know that there's a mistake. It needs to be corrected, some way to follow up. Ultimately, it's going to go to the Attorney General's office if it doesn't get done and somebody's complaining, but I would hope that there'd be a way that we could do something before we get to that point.
Well, and I would too, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, because my understanding is that the enforcement of it, to use your words, lies solely with the Attorney General. That is the only person who can, enforcement meaning that you can dictate that someone is not in compliance and force changes. I don't know that any other body, including the Board of Selectmen, can do that.
Although, what I would say, at least for those committees that we appoint, let me step back. The Board of Selectmen leads by example, and I believe does a very good job. And I would commend the town manager and the person who records the minutes. We have agendas that are clear, and we've improved it recently. We've added things to executive sessions. The minutes are what they say they should be, which is that somebody who did not attend the meeting would be able to read the minutes and understand what happened at the meeting. That's not happening consistently across the town. So we had town council out to do training. It was on TV. I would say that at least for the committees that we oversee, that we could require them to do additional training. We could encourage other elected boards to do additional training. Certainly publicizing, for instance, when I brought up the various things about minutes and agendas, both Carrie's action and the town clerk's action has, just about all of those minutes have been posted and agendas have been posted. Whether they're the right agendas and minutes is another discussion. That's the next level. So I think that we've got the bully pulpit ability to say we need to do it. And in fact, if somebody doesn't do it on a committee that we appoint, we should not reappoint them.
I'm not against that. I think that's perfectly fine.
I think the point that needs to be made is the difference between willful misconduct and just someone not knowing or making a mistake. And if I read the tons of paper on open meeting law that I've kind of researched, it seems to me that the first step, although it includes the AG's office, would be to notify the body that supposedly isn't following open meeting law, and as long as they make that public, acknowledge the complaint, deliberate on the complaint, and remedy it, then the communication with the AG's office is really just to say, we took care of it. And then we go to the next step.
Right.
And I think that's important to make that differentiation.
And I would support that. I would totally support that. Because I think that, as you just indicated and referenced, that the amount of notes and detail of the open meeting law is pretty extensive. And the reading is pretty extensive. And, do I expect people to know it? I expect them to know, not every single detail. It's not a quiz on memorizing the open meeting law. And if they're posting agendas and they're posting agenda items and executive sessions and not doing minutes in the right way, these are clear things that everybody needs to do, and we need to address them, any deficiencies in them. But I think you're right. I think the idea that something is done either unintentionally or willfully makes a huge difference where you go. And also, even if they're not doing it willfully and you start the second time and then you're getting to the third time, then it's like, I agree with Mr. Ebersol. Then it's like, we can't be reappointing people who keep doing this, who just won't learn.
If it's repetitive, if they've been made aware that it's a shortfall and they keep doing it, then at that point it's willful.
Right. I mean,
and part of the question becomes, it's a broken record for me, but having been the former town clerk and giving things out, and the law changed recently to be more specific, but the basic issues have been there for 30, 40 years. And I think we still have some committees, elected and appointed, that are not following the open meeting law, and I consider it willful because they consistently don't do what they should do as a minimum. If you look at the minutes for some things, you don't know what happened. And if you look at the agenda as posted outside town hall, you don't know what's going to happen unless you actually attend the meeting, and oh, by the way, that doesn't necessarily match what was on the agenda. And my concern with that is that the thing from town council is the purpose of the law to eliminate much of the secrecy surrounding deliberations and decisions. And so there's a lot of things, if you think about how open we were tonight, talking about solar, talking about the dog things, it's not always comfortable doing the things in front of the public, let alone on TV. But we have to instill the basic stuff, and I almost think it's like remedial training for the people that we identify for who that should be. And I would dare say for at least the committee that we appoint, we should say, your minutes don't meet, here are some examples, and here's the training that's online, here's the it's on the town's website. Carrie posted it there, the town council's thing there. So I think that there's a long way to go to actually say to somebody, we've identified yours as an issue. And I don't want to be the enforcer of it, and the town manager has plenty of things on her duties to do as well, but we ought to come up with something that deals with it, and I hesitate to do another committee, but we need to be creative about how we can do it so it's not one person trying to say somebody's not doing it correctly, and oh, by the way, we pointed it out to you and you're still not doing it correctly. We shouldn't get to that point.
Right, and there's a challenge in that because we are individually elected boards when we're talking about other elected boards and committees. I mean, there's a very good reason why there's a separation of authority and power between these boards. And it could be a very slippery slope if we get it to a place where we're enforcing the specifics of what other elected officials and boards are doing, where it could quickly go the wrong way, depending on who's here.
Right, and I wouldn't suggest that we enforce that, but if we have another elected board that's not doing properly, I'd be willing to file a complaint with the Attorney General's office. Now, the fact is, the first step is you have to file a complaint with the board.
Right.
And be specific.
2 weeks to respond.
And so therefore, there should be that process that if we have somebody that's not doing it, that we be willing to do that. Whether we do it as a board or whether we do it individually, I would say that I would prefer that we start with some letters to people saying, you need to do something different. I would prefer not get the state involved, but the open meeting law for the major issues, executive session minutes and agendas, is not as complicated as the rest of the law. And I guess just to close this, I would recommend that when we go back and discuss our policies, that we add this to one of our discussions of policies of what we as a board feel comfortable doing about the open meeting law for the committees that we supervise. Whether we want to get into the other elected ones, that's a different discussion, but I think that we need to, everybody already knows they have to comply, but if they're not complying, we don't have a process by which we deal with that.
Yes, I mean, well, in a way we do, because following the open meeting law, you would file a complaint. Now, if you're going to suggest that we should, before you get to that, have a non-open meeting law prescribed mechanism that somebody informally informs the board, then yes, then I can see that as a policy. But if we're just going to file a complaint that's going to force them to respond to the Attorney General, then A, we don't need a separate procedure, and B, I think it gets to frighten off, and this is the one thing I will point out, it gets to frighten off people who may want to serve, but are very, very nervous about getting involved, and they're skittish about getting involved because now they think there's some kind of penalty at the state level because they didn't follow something, and they're not gonna parse the difference necessarily between, unintentional and willful violation of that law. And that's what we have to really play the balance of.
Right. Beyond that, we're lucky we have a very professional, very, very awesome minute taker over here.
No, that I agree.
Getting late.
By the way, I agree. By the way, I
going.
couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I'll take this opportunity to say I think that the minutes that we have from our recording secretary are fabulous, and I think they really are very concise without being verbose and without being dialogue driven, but very clear about what was discussed. So thank you.
But other boards maybe they have an administrative person that does the minutes. Other ones, it's the volunteers in town again who are tasked with this, and can be again another thing where it's like, we want you to be involved in this, we want you to play our leadership role, and by the way, we don't like your minutes. And by the way, we like them not bad enough that they're so bad that you're looking at $1,000 in fines, and your name's going to be plastered all over the newspapers
But we have people that are not willing, we have people that are not willing to get on committees because of the way they're run.
True.
And part of the open meeting is part of the way they're run, which affects whether somebody's going to volunteer for that process. So we have regulations that it's tough to be on a board, and it makes it hard for people to do the work. But if we don't have the open meeting law enforced, we have other people that will not be involved because they feel that there's shenanigans going on and that there's a process by which they're not going to be able to be protected. And that's, I think...
And by the way, and I don't disagree. I think you said it very well. I think there is a balance between those two factions. Absolutely.
Yep.
I think there are people, and I've heard it myself, personally, that people won't serve because the committee or committees they may serve on are counter to their own philosophy of following current law. I would agree. And so I think we have to address it. I think we should have an informal policy, and we should have instructive materials to say, listen, this is the way you make an agenda. Here are some 1 or 2 examples. Here are some boards or committees or commissions that are following it well. Here are minutes, and you should follow that. I agree. We should have that.
And I think one of the things, going back to the Sewer Commission, which still hasn't posted its minutes yet, and I go back to when I was chair, and I didn't realize we weren't posting our minutes, but Barb does a wonderful job with her minutes. In fact, she admits that she may do too good a job, almost transcription. But when you read those minutes, you know what went on. So I know we've talked with Carrie about a training of people who take minutes. Mm-hmm. And that would be instructive for people of what you should and shouldn't do, and here's some examples. It's tough. I mean, and with budgetary, it's like, it would be nice if we could afford to have the various people, and various boards do have minute takers, but that's going to cost a lot of money. I think that the rudimentary training that we could do with town council is good for the boards. I think then if we could identify the people that actually take the minutes and do additional training there, and as posting the agendas, then that, I think we've been focusing on the committees. I think we need to talk to some administrative folks too as well.
I think going back to the earlier discussion about quorums, I mean, I guess I'm unclear. If the minutes are tabulated or they're collected by the town clerk and they're posted by the town clerk, I mean, if there's a glaring error or an issue where, say, there's a meeting going on, but there's obviously not a quorum, and then the minutes are accepted and posted, again, the town clerk's not responsible for enforcement. However, I mean, it seems there's a disconnect there.
Right.
Where,
well, I mean, that's part of the issue, is that the town clerk is required to not only post them as far as the town bylaw, but we have the process by which they're there. And in fact, some people, when they take their minutes, they don't list who's there. So that's another issue of who's there and who's not there. So you get some immediate things that, well, was there a quorum or not? We don't know. It wasn't there. We would need to talk to the town clerk to see if she and her office have the capacity to do that, or, are we going to be going to... I think there needs to be that discussion, because I don't believe she has the legal authority to question it if somebody pushed back. And so...
Well, we should check into that. I don't know the answer to that either,
No.
but one would believe that if you were given a document that you knew did not follow or was in violation of the open meeting law, whether it be an agenda or accepted minutes, that I don't expect the town clerk's office to go through the minutes and read them, but at the top should be the date you met, where you met, and who was there and who was absent. I think that's required by the open meeting law. And if you accept those, in a way, one could argue that there's a complicit nature of doing that, whereas if you knew they were not right, you should kick them back saying, I can't accept these because these don't follow it. I don't know if she has that right either, that I shouldn't say she, that the office has that right, but it would be nice to know that. As the only person who's allowed to post agendas especially, one would think that would be the last safeguard against posting something that clearly did not follow open meeting law standards.
we probably could have had a bylaw to require that, but...
I'd like to make a comment about that, and I'd be happy to talk to the town clerk about what her understanding is in terms of enforcing, so to speak. I mean, I can tell you what my experience is. I am regularly asked about items that are on the agenda and things that appear in the minutes, because I know she is reviewing our agendas and our minutes, and at many times has pointed out things to me that have been very helpful. And I guess I made the assumption that I don't regularly review agendas and minutes. I see planning board. That one might be one that I look at pretty regularly. But other than that, the school committee, I'm not really looking at them, so I made the assumption that the same level of oversight was occurring. And I can tell you she's, in many instances, been very helpful in pointing out things that aren't quite right. I mean, I don't get the agenda right 100% of the time on my own. She is helping out quite a bit. So I would be happy to have that conversation with her and see what she feels that she has the authority to do and report that back to you.
She also has, sort of jumping ahead somewhat, she contacted the library and said, based on your agenda, you're missing the following minutes. That was very helpful. That was a very proactive thing. And they were getting those together, and they said, oh, we posted that meeting just before town meeting in case we needed to have some action. We didn't tell you we didn't. So that I think is a great way of doing that. And if we can have that either as a policy or a bylaw or something so that if the next incumbent or the current incumbent changes, that we have something that we can rely on.
It just seems there's a wealth of knowledge and experience, and if everything funnels through one place, it just seems it would be the simplest, most logical fix,
And I would say, as one parting remark, that it's upon all of us as committee, board, commission members, whether elected or appointed, that within your own committee to really police that and make the chair know and make the other committee members know if something's not being followed or you think it's not being followed, then have that discussion. Or if you're attending these meetings and you feel that something wasn't posted, to make people aware of that. I mean, again, I believe the first line of action should be an informal one. Let people know, give them the opportunity to correct it going forward, and then take it from there. So, minutes. And warrants. Payroll in the amount of $640,474.99. Payroll deductions in the amount of $259,256.42. And accounts payable in the amount of $329,939.04. Action file issues. Anybody have any action file issues?
I do.
Mr. Matthews.
Whalum Road. What the hell is going on Whalum Road?
Water department.
I mean, there's okay, so it's water department?
If you're...
I'm talking about the trenches in the road still, and it's been a couple of weeks or a week, whatever. There's no signage, there's no warning, there's no indication of uneven pavement, et cetera. And, daytime, you can kind of see it coming. I'm not sure about nighttime, but I would just think we would do a better job of alerting people that there's some rough road ahead, because it could throw you off, it could scare you, and you could cause an accident.
I can pass that along to the superintendent. All I can tell you is it's a water district project, and I can't tell you the particulars without going back and looking at my notes.
I mean, coordinating between the water district and our DPW I mean, it's our roads, we're responsible for them. I mean, there should be some standards of notification and signage out there.
Carrie, the road opening permit, does that go to DPW? That doesn't come to, I think the selectmen used to do it a long, long time ago, but
Never comes here.
Right, that's something
With
that has been delegated to the DPW.
DPW, okay.
Any other action file issues? Committee reports, Board of Health.
Board of Health was one of the committees that posted their minutes, so thanks to them. No additional information since the last meeting.
Building Reuse Committee.
Excuse me, met last evening. We're making considerable progress. The next meeting is Monday evening, Town Hall, 6:30.
Capital Planning Committee.
It's tomorrow morning, and we begin the first of the reviews for budget submissions.
Finance Committee.
The only agenda item was a tour of the Regional Dispatch Center, which occurred last Thursday.
Excellent. Library Board of Trustees.
Library met last Thursday, a week ago Thursday, and talked about the minutes. A little clarification on the fiscal 13 budget when they had money left over at the end of the year. I think this is a transition from the personnel there to what they have now. They were not aware that they could transfer funds from salary to expenses within their line item, but it may have happened after a time period when you can't do it at the end of the fiscal year, so I'm not sure. So they understand that in this fiscal year, they need to plan to make sure that they, meet whatever deadlines they need to make sure that they're expending their funds. So that was made clear. They're working on, they had an interesting open meeting law issue in that they meet at the library and the library closes before their end of their meeting. So they need to make provisions so that one door remains unlocked so somebody could actually come in to the meeting. And so it was an interesting concept that we had a discussion. They were very aware of it. And the building has been painted, and they thanked capital planning, the town meeting, DPW. They're very happy with the results, and the money came in a lot lower than they expected.
Thank you. Paula is not here, so we have no MPO and Planning Board. PAC.
I believe we're meeting with them next week.
On the 15th.
On the 15th.
2 weeks.
Sorry, 2 weeks.
Okay, School Committee.
They met last week. They reviewed population enrollments, which continue to decline, even with the new developments that are in the ground. The lacrosse team is moving forward. There was a lot of private fundraising went into that, and establishing a new sport. The fundraising is supposed to pay for its operation entirely due to demand and interest by the student population and adding lacrosse, and the parents have put a lot of work into it, which is something to see. MCAS results were reviewed. Again, good solid movement forward and improvement. And there was discussions, State Rep Benson was there to discuss, there's a state law allowing for towns to establish stabilization funds for special ed funding, because of course it's a fairly volatile budget line item for them. You could have someone move into the district mid-year that's going to cost $160,000 or more to place outside if their needs are beyond what the schools can give. The idea of the stabilization fund is if you put aside money, you don't spend it, you can put it into that, and then you can, establish a fund going forward should you have an unexpected move-in. Some discussion on that. Again, it would have the same rules and guidelines of stabilization, 2/3 vote in and out. I'm not sure how much sense it makes for Lunenburg, because of course you've got to have the money to put in to begin with. But it was interesting. I believe that's it.
Did you say that was there was legislation proposed to authorize that?
Yeah, and I know
Yeah,
towns
I was
can
gonna say it
establish a
doesn't
number
exist
of.
yet. Right, they were talking about passing something, right?
I think it was pretty close to, but almost sounded like a done deal.
School Building Committee.
School Building Committee, we had a very busy couple of weeks. We met last night, met here, televised meeting. We got the estimates in for the construction from both the construction manager and the OPM and designer, they put together final numbers, came in at, estimated at this point off the schematic is about $74 million. We were trying to come in the $70 to $75 million range. We came in just under at $235,771. And that, of course, includes the $750,000 for the study, the feasibility study and schematic we're already in the middle of. Actually, it took a lot of value engineering to get back under the 75 million. And there'll be more of that to come. We have an expected reimbursement from the MSBA at 58.25%. However, they don't reimburse for asbestos removal, which we have a couple $100,000 of that to do in the old building. They only cover site costs at 8% of construction costs. So currently we have site costs estimated about $2 million over what they would reimburse, which is significant. And they also only reimburse at, well, it's combined, the baseline is $275 per square foot, and then they add back in some demo expense and some of the asbestos remediation. So their actual reimbursement is $291.25.
A square foot.
A square foot.
Okay.
The reality is costs are currently at $360.85. And based on the input of the OPM, et cetera, the 360 is a lot closer to reality and actually lower than the buildings they've been doing lately. The state baseline is a 3-year-old number, and they feel it's still in the range. I feel it's handy state house math to ignore reality and instead fund on what you want to. So our real reimbursement rate is just over 48% when you factor in the reality of what they don't reimburse. So what will happen is this will go, the committee voted last night to accept this and to move it forward to the MSBA. The expectation the MSBA is going to go through it, review it. They will likely make changes. They may reduce it. We are also set up a subcommittee to go line by line through the plan proposal, look at materials, et cetera, look at the site plans, see what we can't back off of to reduce bulk building cost, because anything we can reduce comes directly out of our share. So again, our goal will not to be, we're not going to want to compromise on quality. We're not going to want to compromise on efficiency of the building. We're not going to want to compromise on useful life, but it'll be some aesthetics and maybe put off some choices for fields, et cetera, whatever is going to make sense, or how, robust the build out is on the fields, et cetera. So we got a lot of work to do yet. Everyone is very cognizant of the fact that the costs are coming in higher than what we had anticipated. I mean, it's in the range, but what's really hurting us is the actual reimbursement we're seeing from the state. So I think everyone on the committee is motivated to get those numbers back down. So we didn't go into too much discussion beyond that, other than we wanted to really work those numbers down to get more acceptable to everybody. And we had a brief discussion on the impact on the average tax bills. However, I was hesitant to get too far into that again until we get clearer, cleaner end numbers, but preliminary discussion so people are aware.
Yeah, I think it should be mentioned because it was mentioned at the meeting last night. So we had put together models based on both a 20-year and a 30-year payback on the project, and we're looking at because it will be several years out before we're financing, we're using between a 3.5% and a 4.25% interest rate. So on a 20-year, if we were to pay back 20 years, we're looking at an impact to the average household of about $525. No, I'm sorry, 20-year, $650. And if we did a 30-year, $525.
Per year.
And those are, right, that's just very preliminarily right now, ballpark. But since we mentioned it last night, I think it bears repeating.
Right. And the discussion was, of course, 30 years might look easier to deal with today, but it adds so much cost in the back end, and it extends that debt for, of course, 10 more years, and it adds about $10 million in total cost. So, I know the way I try to do things personally is try to have more paying up front and get it over with as much as I can, and then limit my cost. But again, we'll have to talk through what's going to make sense for the taxpayers that will have to bear this. And I just wanted to add to what Mr. Toll had mentioned about the visit over to the regional dispatch, because I had attended that as well. They'd invited us. Just want to let people know that they're in good shape to set up with the 911 EMD, which of course is a whole driver for us to get into this regional dispatch for its cost avoidance, because we're at a point where once you're on a medical call, a dispatcher, you can't come off that call. So you could be on a call for 20 minutes solid, which means no other activity could happen. So we would have had to double up our staffing to make that happen locally here, or close to it, to have 2 on hand for those occurrences. So they're in good shape to make that happen. Other benefits, our dispatch center is still actually being used as a backup. As we've learned in our lives recently, you never can be too sure of what your operation, if it's going to be there when you need it, and you need to have another place to do business. So the dispatch center that the taxpayers paid for when we put up our public safety facility is still being used. It's a backup, but it's in place. If it needs to happen, we can put it back to work. So it's not, just gone to the mothballs. And they also noted that since this is a regional operation, they have much readier access to grants than we ever would. We have a lot of discussion in this town about getting more grants, getting more funds from the state, federal, whatever. And our reality is we don't tend to qualify. We just don't make the cut. But a regional operation does, so, and they've been making good use of that.
And they were just awarded just over $400,000 in grant funding, which is pretty amazing when you're looking at it. They're less than $1 million a year in operations and got $400,000 in grants.
Excellent. And when are the chiefs going to be here? This going to be in November?
Well, it may be November at this point. What we were waiting for is Harvard, the last community, to come in. We wanted to make sure that transition had occurred. We didn't want to pull the director off of that. And it's been, it should be occurring by the end of this month. The town of Harvard has a different cable provider, so there was issues with getting the right size cable between, or the connection between the town of Harvard and the dispatch facility, so that's held things up.
Okay. Well, I want to meet the director, but I was more interested in hearing from our chiefs about how it's working, about how it's affected us locally. Yeah. So as soon as we can schedule that, I think it's been up and running enough times that they can at least give us a status of how that transition's gone and how they see it, where we are and where it's going. Sewer Commission.
Sewer Commission met. They're staying on top of the delayed finish of Lancaster Ave extension. They clarified their requirements for the Lunenburg Village 40B off of Whalum Road if it's extended by the Zoning Board of Appeals, so that the new fees and charges that we will be charged by Leominster would be recouped, whereas the current agreement doesn't include that. Fitchburg IMA, it's with us, but it's gone to the city of Fitchburg so that they can go through their process, and then it'll come back, and then there'll be a meeting with them making a presentation to us. Highfield Village, the development behind Walmart, they finally submitted a sewer plan to the sewer department. And that's being sent to peer reviewer, which is being paid for by the developer. So we can actually say now that they actually have a plan that they can review. And they're still seeking people on Pratt Street for the extension there. There's one resident that is trying to reach out to the people who have not responded. I think there's a clearly that was one of the identified needs of the sewer extension, and that would be a good time to get that in at the same time as we're doing other projects. That's it for sewer.
And no report on mass broadband, which continues its work. We are not scheduled to be lit until December, so. Town manager reports.
No, I don't have anything.
None. No appointments or reappointments. Our next meeting, October 8th, next Tuesday. Any closing public comment from the board?
Mr. Chairman, two things. One, following up on Mr. Matthews' comment about the dispatch, I talked with the director. 70% of emergency calls in Massachusetts are now coming from a mobile device. So if you think of E911 telling the dispatcher where you are, 70% of those calls currently don't do that. So that is something that they are working on, the next generation of E911, as well as texting to E911, because the younger generation don't make phone calls, they text. I do more texting than I used to.
Even if they die.
Well, they actually
even if autocorrect totally mismanages what the emergency is.
And to bring us back to some real seriousness, they actually had a situation in Massachusetts where a woman in a domestic violence situation was able to send an email to the police department, and the police department happened to be at the desk at the time, and they couldn't have made the phone call. So it's all these different ways of communicating. Same thing of what we talked about with the open meeting law, the way we're posting things on YouTube now. The thing I like about the YouTube is we're now reaching to people in Lunenburg who don't have cable.
Right, I agree.
DirecTV, whatever, you can get the things, and it's really reaching out. The second thing, Selectman Bertram Toll and myself attended the Unitil hearing, and Paula gave a very passionate plea. I gave a testimony. Paula's husband gave really good testimony as well. So I think the town was well represented. Representatives were there, as well of our elected officials, as well as other communities. We'll see what happens with the rate request.
Yes, I thank everybody for being there. Unfortunately, I was away. I would hope to be there, but I was not in town, so thank you for doing that. Any public comment from the public? Thank you for waiting it out.
No problem. I just had one concern as an animal lover, and I know many of you are animal lovers as well. During the hearing tonight, there was a comment about tying your dog out or chaining your dog out, and I had a concern about that, and I know that there are some restrictions on that in the general law under animal cruelty. So I just was hoping that maybe the board could address that at some point, or the animal control officer could address that. Or if you want me to look at it and bring it some other time, I could do that.
Well, I mean, as far as from the hearing tonight, the statute is very clear about what we can't do. So you can't tell an owner to put a stake in the ground or put your dog around a tree because of the building.
I'm not really speaking to the decision that was made here tonight. I'm speaking to the comments made about tying your dog out or chaining your dog out. I think under animal cruelty statute, that would.
Right, it has to be, right, it has to be, I'm just referencing the statute because it says you can, and I realize you're not talking about our order, but the order says to humanely restrict the animal, and they're talking about runs, so you can put dogs on runs. You can't put them around something that's going to either severely restrict their mobility, and that's not only by our order, right, owners can't do it either, and I guess there are probably definitions from the MSPCA about what those are.
There are.
And you can't get them in a position where they could wrap themselves around and strangle themselves either. So they have to have some kind of exercise movement over a decent amount of territory. But I don't know beyond that. And we could ask that.
The general law does speak to it. I don't have it with me. I can't speak. I just know that there is something in the general law about tying a dog out and chaining a dog out. There has to be certain measures met. They have to have adequate water, et cetera, et cetera. And it just gave me the impression that it was being stated that it was okay to chain or rope your dog out. That's all. All right.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everyone.